Chapter 627. While Mount Kunlun was changing, the other Saint Dojos, such as Mount Shoyang, Golden Ao Island, and Mount Meru were also changing. Endless Tao patterns that were emitting divine light rose from their bodies, illuminating the entire primordial world. It was extremely bright. What's going on? Are the saints coming back? The sudden change in the Saint Dojos confused all living beings in the primordial world. They could only think that it was a phenomenon that was spontaneously produced by the Saint Dojos because the saints were about to return from outer space. However, while the living beings did not understand the reason, the great divines seemed to have vaguely understood something. They're trying to isolate the world. Thinking about Great Emperor Ziwei's plan, the great divines made a guess. The subsequent actions of the saints' Daoist temples undoubtedly confirmed their guesses. Rumble. Soon after the Saint Dojos emitted the bright divine light, they began to slowly retract their power. Almost visible to the naked eye, the rising divine light and Tao patterns began to rapidly retract and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. This change did not mark the end of the phenomenon, but it meant that the Saint Dojos were trying their best to retract their power and store it in their bodies to erupt with stronger waves. Bang! When the power was accumulated to the limit, there was a bang, and several extremely terrifying waves gushed out from the Saint Dojos. Whoosh! The power exploded like fireworks, giving rise to countless mysterious runes that were embedded in the void. They were densely packed and spread around the sages' dojos. At this moment, all living beings in the primordial world looked at the Saint Dojos and realized that the supreme holy land that used to be shrouded by the clear saint she could not be seen clearly today. Because, in the void, countless mysterious runes were densely packed. They were dazzling and mysterious as they emitted divine light. Like a net, they completely enveloped the void where the sages' dojos were located, making it impossible for anyone to see them clearly. Just as everyone was puzzled, another change occurred. Boom! 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 In the distant chaos outside the heavens, there were suddenly 4 supreme dermic powers that broke through layers of the void and rushed over, landing in the 4 Saint Dojos. The 5 saints of the 3 pure ones, Zhu and Ti, made their move. As for why Her Highness Nuwa did not make a move, that was because after Empress Nuwa became a saint, she directly moved the dojo to the chaos outside the heavens, the Jinshio heaven that she had created herself. Therefore, Empress Nuwa did not have a Daoist temple in the great desolate world. It was precisely because of this that the retreat of the great mystical abilities from the primordial world had nothing to do with him. After all, he was no longer in the primordial world. A saint's attack was naturally extraordinary. Just as the 4 streams of dermic powers were about to reach the mysterious rune, they suddenly collapsed and turned into strands of connate origin energy that merged with the mysterious rune. With the help of the saint's power, the power of the mysterious rune suddenly skyrocketed. It became more and more resplendent, and an endless mysterious aura bloomed. In just an instant, it connected with the sky. Whoosh! Brilliant light screens appeared outside the dojos of the saints, isolating them from the desolation realm. Whoosh whoosh! After the light screen flickered for a moment, it disappeared into the void. The towering Kunlun mountain and the other saints' dojos reappeared in front of everyone's eyes. After that, the primordial world returned to peace, as if everything that had happened just now was an illusion. However, all living beings knew that everything was different. Although the saints' dojo was still standing there, it was as if there was a layer of gauze between it and the crowd, making it ethereal. The void where they were located had been completely separated from the primordial world under the isolation of the mysterious rune. In other words, the saints' dojo could be said to be independent of the world. Their positions seemed to have not moved, but in fact, they were separated from all living beings by endless time and space. A cultivator whose cultivation had not reached the level of Daluo Jingxian, even if the Kunlun mountain was right in front of him, he would not be able to get close to the Kunlun mountain even if he spent his entire life. The world where they were located was completely different. The Kunlun mountain and the other saints' dojos had become unreachable in the eyes of all living beings. That was how it should be. After all, the level they were at. It was not something that all living beings should come into contact with. The saints' actions today could be said to have a great impact on the primordial world. At the very least, the powerful beings who had been hesitating about whether to evacuate the primordial world had already made up their minds. Sigh. It's the will of the heavens. Let's leave. After making up their minds, the group of powerful beings acted straightforwardly. Without any hesitation, they cut off the connection between their dojos and the primordial world. Just like the saints' dojo, they were completely isolated from the primordial world. It was also from that day onwards that the phenomena of the primordial world were endless. Almost every year, powerful beings would leave the primordial world with their dojos. This situation lasted for tens of thousands of years. It was only when the living beings of the primordial world were about to get used to it that it gradually decreased and even disappeared. After the saint led the dojos and left the primordial world, all the powerful beings of the primordial world finally left the primordial world after a period of time. For a moment, the primordial world fell silent. Without the suppression of the powerful beings, the living beings of the primordial world felt as if a huge rock had disappeared from their hearts. They were completely relaxed and their entire bodies were clear. Even the laws of heaven and earth became more active after the great divine ability masters left. It was as if they had been suppressed when the powerful beings were around. Now that they had finally relaxed, they wanted to be active as much as they could. In fact, that was indeed the case. The strength of the powerful beings was really too strong. They had almost reached the end of the great Tao. Therefore, even if they had no intention of suppressing the laws of heaven and earth, their great Tao was there. That powerful aura naturally affected the laws of heaven and earth and interfered with their normal operation. The strong were enough to change the world. It was not a joke. It really existed. Obviously, the powerful beings had this ability. The influence of one or two powerful beings on the laws of heaven and earth might be limited. However, when hundreds or even thousands of powerful beings appeared in the primordial world at the same time, their influence on the laws of heaven and earth could be imagined. It could be said that all living beings in the primordial world were living under the shadow of the great Tao of the powerful beings. That was obviously not a good thing for all living beings. If they could not get rid of the shadow of others in the future, how could they attain the Tao? That was also one of the reasons why there were fewer and fewer experts in the primordial world. Therefore, the departure of the powerful beings was also a good thing for all living beings in the primordial world. At the very least, without the suppression of the great Tao of the powerful beings, it would be much easier for all living beings to cultivate than before. With the departure of the powerful beings, the laws of heaven and earth became more and more active. The primordial world welcomed a long-awaited golden age of cultivation. Everyone was immersed in cultivation. And this, for Feng Zichen, it was just the beginning. Although the powerful beings had evacuated the primordial world as a whole, it did not mean that they had completely cut off their connection with the primordial world. The boundless spacetime that spanned across their dojos and the primordial world was obstructing the living beings of the primordial world, not them. With the ability of the powerful beings, they could completely ignore the endless spacetime and directly interfere with the primordial world. The so-called evacuation of the primordial world only meant that their true bodies were not in the primordial world, but their power could still affect the primordial world. In other words, in fact, their so-called evacuation of the primordial world was only in the situation, not in fact. But what was the use of evacuating in the situation? Therefore, the next step of Feng Zichen's plan was to promote the implementation of heaven and earth isolation. With the almost invincible luck of the human clan, he could forcefully cut off the passage between heaven and earth, causing heaven and earth to be no longer connected. At that time, any existence outside the primordial world who wanted to interfere with the primordial world would definitely be attacked by the luck of the human clan. At that time, the primordial world would be truly safe. After all, even the saints coveted the luck of the protagonists of heaven and earth and would not hesitate to throw away their dignity to fight for it. From this, it could be seen that the terrifying luck of the human clan was definitely not something that the powerful beings could contend with. The departure of the powerful beings had the greatest impact on the primordial world. It could be said that the human clan was the one that had the greatest impact on the primordial world. With the support of the human clan's luck, Xuanyuan's strength had reached the level of half-step primordial chaos, far surpassing the level of Shinong's sage-to-be perfection. That's right. After this internal strife, the human clan had completely suppressed the myriad clans and gathered the luck of the myriad clans. It could be said that their luck had experienced an unprecedented increase. Under this influence, Xuanyuan's strength naturally rose as well. From the original realm of sage-to-be perfection, he had reached the realm of half-step primordial chaos. With such strength, in the era when the powerful beings left the primordial world en masse, he could definitely be called invincible. Yes. He was really invincible. The heavens and the earth did not count. With such an expert holding down the fort, who among the myriad clans would dare to act rashly? It was precisely because of this that the human clan entered a period of rapid development, and their strength soared exponentially. Of course, the reason for this outcome, it was all based on the situation of suppressing the myriad clans. In the past, although there were many resources in the primordial world, there were even more races in the primordial world. Everyone divided a little, and there wasn't much that they actually got. But now, the situation was completely different. As the human clan became stronger and stronger, the previous model was obviously no longer applicable. Now, more than half of the resources in the primordial world had entered the pockets of the human clan. None of the myriad clans dared to compete with them. After Xianyuan defeated Qiyu, in order to obtain the forgiveness of the human clan, the myriad clans began to pay tribute to the human clan. Just these tributes were a shocking amount of wealth, enough to cultivate a large number of experts for the human clan. It could be said that the myriad clans were using their own blood to support the human clan. In this way, it was difficult for the human clan not to be strong. Logically speaking, Xianyuan should be satisfied that the myriad clans had done so much. But in fact, Xianyuan was far from satisfied. He really wanted to take this opportunity to swallow the myriad clans in one fell swoop so that he could completely establish the supreme status of the human clan. But the reality made him extinguish this crazy idea. Although the myriad clans were no match for the might of the human clan, this did not mean that the myriad clans did not have the strength to fight against the human clan. If they really wanted to fight, the human clan might be able to destroy the myriad clans, but the price they would have to pay was definitely something that the current human clan could not bear. Perhaps the human clan would be unable to recover from this setback. Therefore, considering the consequences of doing so, Xianyuan had no choice but to suppress the thoughts in his heart and feign civility with the myriad clans. This situation lasted until the 950th year of the human emperor's calendar, which was also the 950th year of Xuanyuan's power, before there was a change. The 950th year of the human emperor's calendar had reached the end of the human emperor's rule. It was also at this time that the human emperor began to gradually put down the power in his hands and focused on cultivating the Tao. For this reason, human emperor Xianyuan specially issued a decree to invite the experts of the myriad clans to come to the human emperor's palace to discuss the Tao. Everyone could exchange what they needed to reach a higher realm. After receiving the order, the experts of the myriad clans did not dare to be negligent, they all set off for the human emperor's palace. At first, as the decree said, human emperor Xianyuan invited everyone over to discuss the Tao with his fellow Taoists. But as time passed, the atmosphere of the Tao discussion gradually changed. The reason was that during the discussion, human emperor Xianyuan had vaguely mentioned more than once that he was reluctant to part with the feelings of his subjects. He hoped that after he ascended to the heaven realm, everyone could leave with him. How could the experts of the myriad clans agree to this? Everyone had families and businesses. How could they abandon their families and businesses and follow human emperor Xianyuan to the heaven realm to start anew? Wasn't this a joke? Besides, if they really left, what would happen to their race? They were afraid that as soon as they left, the human race would swallow their race. Moreover, it was different from the primordial world that had undergone several changes, causing the number of experts to decrease. The heaven realm was where most of the top experts of the primordial world were gathered. With their strength, it was fine for them to dominate the primordial world. But once they reached the heaven realm, they were really nothing. There were many in the heaven realm who were stronger than them. There was a saying that it was better to be the head of a chicken than the back of a cow. Didn't they want to be the overlords of the primordial world? Why did they have to go to the heaven realm to be bullied? Due to the above reasons, the experts of the myriad clans were unwilling to leave the primordial world. As for the easier world, it gradually became unsuitable for Daluo Jinxian's life. The experts of the myriad clans expressed that they did not care at all. With the foundation of the myriad clans, it was impossible to contend against the easier world. However, it was still possible to support a few Daluo Jinxian. Therefore, they had the conditions to stay in the primordial world. Since that was the case, why should they leave? But if they didn't leave, how could they explain to human Emperor Xianyuan? After all, he had already hinted. They couldn't just ignore it, right? For a moment, the experts of the myriad clans were in a dilemma. Wait. Ignore it. In a trance, the experts of the myriad clans thought of a solution. Just pretend to be stupid. Anyway, you, Xianyuan, didn't say it directly, so we'll pretend that we didn't hear your hint at all. Chapter 628. Wasn't it just pretending to be stupid? Who didn't know how to do that? With this thought in mind, the experts of the myriad races also did the same. After that, no matter how Emperor Xianyuan hinted, they all pretended not to understand. And regarding this, Xianyuan didn't show too much anger. His actions were originally a test. The reaction of the experts of the myriad races was completely within his expectations. If the experts of the myriad races agreed so easily, that would be a problem. Of course, this wasn't the only reason why Xianyuan wasn't angry. Now, with the strength of the human race, how could the experts of the myriad races disobey what he wanted to do? In other words, the reason why Xianyuan hinted to everyone was not to ask for their opinions, but to give them a heads up in advance so that they wouldn't be unprepared when they ascended to the heaven realm with him. As for whether the experts of the myriad races agreed or not, was that important? After all, the primordial world relied on strength to speak. The weak only needed to follow the rules of the strong. They didn't have much choice. Xuanyuan's fist was bigger and harder than the experts of the myriad races. The experts of the myriad races couldn't compare to him. Then they had to listen to Xianyuan. This was the sorrow of the weak. The fate of the myriad races was destined the moment Qiyu was defeated. They were destined to withdraw from the stage of the primordial world to make room for the human race. This was the will of heaven and the general trend. Anyone who disobeyed would be smashed to pieces by the surging momentum of the situation. The experts of the myriad races couldn't defeat Xianyuan, so they could only follow his rules. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to bear the price of breaking the rules. It was precisely because of this that Xianyuan wasn't in a hurry. Everything was already destined, so why should he be in a hurry? The pitiful experts of the myriad races were complacent because of Xuanyuan's concession, but they didn't notice the destined future at all. It was really sad. Just like that. Under the perfunctory interaction between the two sides, time passed day by day. The human race would also welcome its first great emperor. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 10,000 years had passed. At this time, it had been 960,000 years since the human emperor Xianyuan took power. And the human emperor had only been in power for 1,000,000 years. In other words, there were still more than 40,000 years before Xuanyuan's merit would be complete. 960,000 years of the human emperor calendar, the era of Xuanyuan's rule had finally reached the end of the Great Era. On this day, on the North Star, Feng Zichen suddenly opened his eyes. The time has come. It's time for the Motherf * King Human King to reincarnate as well. With a thought, Feng Zichen formed a hand seal and pointed at the void. Suddenly, boundless Tao patterns separated from Feng Zichen's fingertips. They were densely packed and embedded in the void, slowly opening a passage. Rumble. There was a sudden clap of thunder, shaking the void. Streams of terrifying reincarnation power surged out from the passageway, distorting everything. That was, reincarnation passage. After so many years, Feng Zichen's understanding of the path of reincarnation had deepened. In the blink of an eye, a reincarnation passage could be opened. On this point, compared to when he opened up the reincarnation passage, he had to rely on the authority of the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. It was many times stronger. Whoosh! Just as the reincarnation passage was formed, a dragon-shaped true spirit suddenly appeared at the origin of the North Star. The dragon-shaped true spirit disappeared in a flash. It was wrapped in an imperial purple chi and directly entered the reincarnation passage. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared. This scene meant that the first Motherf * King Human King had reincarnated. Rumble. On this day, the destiny of the human race shook, and the torch flame appeared automatically. It burned fiercely in the long river of destiny like the sun, blooming with bright light, illuminating all corners of the universe. Endless strange phenomena evolved, and it did not stop for years. At the same time, the dragon race, which had not moved for a long time, began to undergo inexplicable changes the moment the dragon-shaped true spirit entered the reincarnation passage. Rumble. Amidst a violent roar, the dragon race's destiny appeared without warning, stirring up the wind and clouds in the 4 seas. Roar, 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 roar. For a time, above the 4 seas, because of the inexplicable appearance of the dragon race's destiny, a series of majestic dragon roars suddenly sounded. The sudden change caused the sea tribe to fall into a daze. They had no idea what had happened. As for the dragon emperor and the elders of the dragon race, when they saw this inexplicable change, they vaguely understood something. They silently appeared in the depths of the void, quietly observing the changes in the situation. Rumble. Just as the sea tribe was in a daze, the scene changed again. Endless dragon chi burst out from the void, forming a huge and glorious door in the sky above the 4 seas. Dragon Gate. The Dragon Gate of the dragon race. Under the situation where no one summoned it, the Dragon Gate appeared automatically, like the door of the Great Tao, towering above the 4 seas, exuding endless majesty. Chi. In an instant, endless divine light burst out from the Dragon Gate. It was incomparably dazzling, illuminating the entire 4 seas. Whoosh! The divine light was dazzling and crystal clear. It was like a drizzle, like a stream of light, slowly falling from the void, sprinkling the entire 4 seas. Almost all the sea tribe was bathed in the dazzling divine light. This was a gift. The Dragon Gate's gift to the sea tribe was used to enhance their bloodline. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the divine light entered their bodies and continuously baptized the bodies of the sea tribe, purifying their bloodline, causing them to continuously transform into a true dragon. Although this transformation was far less intense than directly leaping over the Dragon Gate, it could save the sea tribe thousands of years of bitter cultivation and further enhance their bloodline. To the sea tribe, improving their bloodline was more important than improving their cultivation. Therefore, the appearance of the Dragon Gate this time was no less than a great opportunity for the sea tribe. Perhaps, after digesting what they had obtained this time, when they leaped over the Dragon Gate next time, they would undoubtedly be much more confident. The luck of the human race and the dragon race changed at the same time. It would be an insult to everyone's IQ if they said that there was no connection between the two. But what could they do if they knew that there was a connection? Those who were qualified to know the reason for all of this would not poke their nose into other people's business to avoid being involved in karma. And those who were not qualified to know would not poke their nose into other people's business. Because regardless of whether it was the human race or the dragon race, they were existences that they could not afford to offend. The strange phenomenon of the two races gradually disappeared after the birth of the imperial grandson Zhuanshu. The imperial grandson Zhuanshu, the ancient dragon race's dragon sovereign, was the reincarnation of the water dragon. He was the patriarch of the water dragon bloodline of the dragon race and the best of the 3 generations of the dragon race. His birth marked that the relationship between the dragon race and the human race had taken a step closer and truly become inseparable. One could see that, with the birth of the imperial grandson Zhuanshu, in the long river of fate, the 9-clawed divine dragon that represented the luck of the dragon race and the eternal torch that represented the luck of the human race gradually approached each other. A sparkling and translucent thread suddenly appeared and connected the luck of the two races together. It could be seen with the naked eye. Strands of luck flowed in the thread and flowed into each other's bodies, blending with each other to show the inseparable relationship between the two races. The imperial grandson Zhuanshu was extremely talented, and his cultivation talent was even more extraordinary. He was born less than 100 years ago, but he had already cultivated to the celestial immortal realm. He was even invincible among the younger generation of the myriad races. He was faintly known as the second Shenyuan. Human Emperor Shenyuan liked this grandson very much, so he brought him along and personally taught him. He faintly seemed to be grooming him as his successor. Of course, Zhuanshu did not disappoint Shenyuan. He used his outstanding ability to win the approval of the elders of the human race and the destiny of the human race, making him the legitimate successor of the human race. The primordial world did not count years. In the blink of an eye, 30,000 years had passed since Zhuanshu was born. At this time, it was already the 990,000th year of the human emperor's calendar. At this time, human emperor Shenyuan had already given up all the power in his hands and handed it all over to Zhuanshu. In other words, although Zhuanshu did not have the name of the human emperor, he already had the power of the human emperor. As for Zhuanshu, after many years of training, he had already become a qualified emperor. Over the years, Shenyuan had seen Zhuanshu's performance and was very satisfied with him. It was also from this time that Shenyuan was completely relieved and began to carry out his plan. In the 990,000th year of the human emperor's calendar, a huge change suddenly happened in the primordial world. Myriad races wanted to join forces to suppress the human emperor Shenyuan. This move undoubtedly shocked all living beings in the primordial world. And the reason for all of this was all based on an order from Shenyuan. It was in the last 10,000 years of Xuanyuan's power. This invincible emperor of Earth suddenly issued an order. Daluo Jingxian of the myriad races was ordered to go to the heaven realm with him in 10,000 years. It was this order which caused an uproar in the primordial world, and a hint of betrayal arose. Everything was fine. Who was willing to abandon their family and run to the heaven realm? In the past, it was fine to hide the hints, and everyone could still pretend to be stupid. But now, Shenyuan had directly made it clear, and the experts of the myriad races could not continue to pretend to be stupid. To go or not? They had to give the human emperor Shenyuan an answer. In the beginning, the experts of the myriad races still had a glimmer of hope in their hearts, thinking that Shenyuan would not be so ruthless. Therefore, they all went to the ancestral land of the human race to worship Shenyuan, trying to use all kinds of reasons to refuse to go to the heaven realm. Unfortunately, no matter how reasonable and perfect the reasons they found, they could not move Shenyuan. At this time, the experts of the myriad races already understood that the human emperor Shenyuan was determined to take them all away. It was also the fault of the experts of the myriad races for going too far back then. For their own interests, they did not hesitate to provoke internal strife in the human race to oust Shenyuan. It was precisely after experiencing this that Shenyuan knew the harm of the experts of the myriad races. In order to not let his experience be repeated by the juniors, Shenyuan had already sworn in his heart that he would take away all the experts of the myriad races at all costs so that he could clear the obstacles for the future generations. When Shennong ascended the throne, the experts of the myriad races were dissatisfied. When he ascended the throne, the experts of the myriad races were disdainful. These pierced Xuanyuan's heart deeply. At the same time, this also made him understand that the so-called submission of the myriad races was completely unreliable. The one that the myriad races respected and feared was him. Once he left, the faces of the myriad races would quickly change. This point, when Shennong and he ascended the throne, the myriad races had already shown it vividly. Therefore, this group of scourges had to be eliminated. Even at all costs, they had to be eliminated. Seeing that Xuanyuan's determination could not be shaken, the experts of the myriad races were naturally unwilling to go to the heaven realm. Therefore, after they returned to the myriad races, they all entered a state of preparation for battle, intending to fight to the death with Shenyuan. The experts of the myriad races were able to cultivate to the realm of Daluo Jingxian and even the realm of Sage to be. Naturally, they did not lack bravery. Usually, the reason why they acted so weak and let Xuanyuan do whatever he wanted. That was because Xuanyuan's actions did not cross their bottom line. Therefore, they could endure it. But now, everything was different. The experts of the myriad races had been forced to a dead end by Xuanyuan. There was no way out. Therefore, of course, they had to fight to the death. The experts of the myriad races were ready to join forces and attack the human Emperor Xuanyuan together. This was to express their determination to stay in the untainted land. But before they were ready, someone made a move first. The person who made a move was Great Witch Xing Tian. The number one warrior of the ancient witch race revealed his huge true body of the Great Witch. He waved the ganchi in his hand and brazenly charged into the ancestral land of the human race. Boom! 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 Great Witch Xing Tian took a step forward and crossed an infinite distance. In just a few steps, he had already arrived in front of the human emperor palace and Xuanyuan. Xuanyuan, you little brat, die. In front of the human emperor palace, Xing Tian swung down his axe, intending to split Xuanyuan and the human emperor palace in half. The axe in Xing Tian's hand was transformed from a fragment of Panga's axe. It had the power to split the sky. Even Dong Wang Tai would be injured if he was caught off guard by the axe, let alone Xuanyuan. Therefore, if Xing Tian's axe really hit Xuanyuan, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. Great Witch Xing Tian, you are too presumptuous. The axe in Xing Tian's hand was transformed from a fragment of Panga's axe. It had the power to split the sky. Even Dong Wang Tai would be injured if he was caught off guard by the axe, let alone Xuanyuan. Therefore, if Xing Tian's axe really hit Xuanyuan, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. Great Witch Xing Tian, you are too presumptuous. The axe in Xing Tian's hand was transformed from a fragment of Panga's axe. It had the power to split the sky. Even Dong Wang Tai would be injured if he was caught off guard by the axe, let alone Xuanyuan. Therefore, if Xing Tian's axe really hit Xuanyuan, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. Great Witch Xing Tian, you are too presumptuous. The axe in Xing Tian's hand was transformed from a fragment of Panga's axe. It had the power to split the sky. Even Dong Wang Tai would be injured if he was caught off guard by the axe, let alone Xuanyuan. Therefore, if Xing Tian's axe really hit Xuanyuan, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. Great Witch Xing Tian, you are too presumptuous. The axe in Xing Tian's hand was transformed from a fragment of Panga's axe. It had the power to split the sky. Even Dong Wang Tai would be injured if he was caught off guard by the axe, let alone Xuanyuan. Therefore, if Xing Tian's axe really hit Xuanyuan, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. Great Witch Xing Tian, you are too presumptuous. Chapter 629. The current Xing Tian was not much weaker than the ancestral shaman back then. There were only a handful of people in the primordial world who could defeat him. With such powerful strength, it would not be a simple matter to help him break down and then rebuild. Because, his physical body was too strong. It had reached the level of a supreme-grade innate spirit treasure. Unless a primordial chaos expert or a primordial chaos expert came with a primordial chaos treasure, it was absolutely impossible to hurt him at all. Therefore, it was not a simple matter for Xing Tian to break and rebuild. Because there were not many people in the primordial world who could do this. Moreover, even if someone could break Xing Tian's physical body, why would he help Xing Tian surpass his limit and not completely destroy him? One had to know that the shaman tribe had a bunch of enemies in the primordial world. They would definitely not be willing to see the shaman tribe have another supreme expert. Why don't I find ancestral shaman Hudu or ancestral shaman Xian Ming to try? After finding the method from the ghost emperor of Fengdu, Xing Tian's first thought was to find ancestral shaman Hudu or ancestral shaman Xian Ming to help him break and rebuild. However, the moment this thought appeared in his mind, it was extinguished by the ghost emperor of Fengdu. Fellow Taoist Xing Tian, although goddess Hudu and ancestral shaman Xian Ming are strong, they are of the same race as you. Can you really stimulate your fighting spirit and fight to the death with them? Looking at Xing Tian, who was eager to try, the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu could not help but pour cold water on him. Breaking the physical body was only secondary. The important thing was how to surpass one's limits in a battle and see the path of the great Tao. Live through death and see the true self. If he wanted to do this, he could only cut off all the fetters and fight to the death with the determination to have a glimmer of hope. If Xing Tian chose to fight with the two ancestral shamans, then, with their relationship, both sides would definitely have some scruples in their hearts and would not be able to fight with all their strength. In this way, it would violate Xing Tian's original intention. Therefore, he could not take it. Fellow Taoist is right. In a battle with the ancestral shamans, whether it is me or the two ancestral shamans, we can't completely let go and fight to the death. After hearing Fengdu Ghost Emperor's words, Xing Tian thought that this was the case. Both sides were so close, so how could they kill each other? But apart from the ancestral sorcerer, where could he find someone who could help him break through his limits? While feeling depressed, Xing Tianxia subconsciously looked at the Fengdu Ghost Arch. When he looked, Xing Tian couldn't help but feel enlightened. Right now, wasn't there one? With this thought in mind, Xing Tian did the same. He took a step forward, bowed to the Fengdu Ghost Emperor, and said, "Please lend me a hand, Taoist brother." In Xing Tian's opinion, Fengdu Ghost Emperor's strength must be unfathomable for him to be able to suppress everyone and sit on the throne of the Netherworld Realm's master. With his ability, perhaps it could help him break through his limits. Good fellow. Seeing Xing Tian's actions, Fengdu Ghost Emperor exclaimed in his heart, "What a guy." Xing Tian's mind was really fast. He actually wanted him to make a move. It had to be said that this was a good idea. With his strength, he could indeed help Xing Tian break through the limit. Unfortunately, Xing Tian's matter was related to Feng Zichen's future plan. Therefore, Fengdu Ghost Emperor did not intend to help him. Thus, Fengdu Ghost Emperor said to Xing Tian, "Fellow Taoist Xing Tian, it's not that poor Wei doesn't want to help you. It's that poor Wei can't help you." Back then, when the Netherworld was first formed, in order to stabilize this land, the ancestral sorcerers elected Poor Wei as the Lord of the Netherworld. Poor Wei is grateful for the kindness of the ancestral sorcerers and specially made an oath that she would never hurt the sorcerer clan for no reason. Therefore, I hope that Poor Wei can't agree to your request. Perhaps the Fengdu Ghost Emperor's words could only be said to be half true and half false, but he absolutely could not take action to suppress Xing Tian. That was because the sorcerer clan had the most power in the Netherworld. If Xing Tian really died at his hands, then no matter what the reason was, the entire sorcerer clan would definitely hate him. TSK. If this was not handled well, his position as the Lord of the Netherworld would come to an end. Think about it, if a person in power was hated by the most powerful force under him, could his orders really be completely carried out? It would probably not be long before he would be overthrown. Therefore, no matter what, Xing Tian could not die at the hands of Fengdu Ghost Emperor. Xing Tian was reckless and didn't consider fellow Taoists' difficulties. Xing Tian was not a fool. With a slight hint from Fengdu Ghost Emperor, he figured out the reason and hurriedly apologized to Fengdu Ghost Emperor. It's good that fellow Taoist doesn't blame Poor Wei for refusing. Fengdu Ghost Emperor waved his hand and said, "Sigh. The ancestral sorcerer can't help, and fellow Taoist can't help either. Then, the only one left is fellow Taoist Mingi. I just don't know if he can help." Xing Tian sighed in disappointment and said with some emotion. Hiss. Hearing this, Fengdu Ghost Emperor could not help but feel a toothache. Xing Tian had a wide range of friends. He even knew an ice block like Patriarch Mingi. However, he could not help. Cough cough. Fellow Taoist Xing Tian, don't forget that the Azura tribe is also in the Netherworld. After coughing a few times, Fengdu Ghost Emperor reminded him. If Patriarch Mingi really killed Xing Tian, the Azura tribe and the Sorcerer tribe would definitely fight. That's true. After Fengdu Ghost Emperor's reminder, Xing Tian could not help but feel distressed. He could not help this one. He could not help that one either. In short, the great divine abilities that he was familiar with could not help. Then, he could not provoke the famous great divine abilities of the primordial world for no reason and let them fight with him. My head hurts. Xing Tian could not help but complain softly in his heart. Fellow Daoist Xing Tian, don't worry. Have you forgotten human Emperor Xianyuan? The enmity of Qiyu is still in front of you. You have to take revenge. At this moment, Fengdu Ghost Emperor felt that the time was right, so he spoke up. That's right. How could I forget Xianyuan? Hearing this, Xing Tian's eyes lit up. He felt that all his frustrations had disappeared in an instant. This guy was good. With a Khanate Cardinal treasure in his hand and a half-step primordial chaos great divine ability, wasn't he the best whetstone? Moreover, there was still a grudge between the two sides. It was completely reasonable to attack him. However, while he was happy, Xing Tian could not help but frown again. The human race and the sorcerer tribe were allies. If he attacked the human emperor, regardless of whether he won or lost, it would cause irreparable damage to the relationship between the two races. Then, did he really have to do that? For a moment, Xing Tian hesitated. Fellow Daoist, are you worried that if you attack Xianyuan, it will affect the relationship between the human race and the sorcerer tribe? Fengdu Ghost Emperor seemed to have seen the hesitation in Xing Tian's heart, so he asked. That's right. Xing Tian nodded and said. There was nothing to hide about this. In that case, then, fellow Daoist, you should go. Shaking his head, Fengdu Ghost Emperor smiled. What? Hearing this, Xing Tian, who thought that he would hear some wise advice, could not help but be shocked. Brother Fengdu, was he trying to sow discord between the human race and the sorcerer tribe? It was not Xing Tian's fault for thinking too much. The words of Fengdu Ghost Emperor were too easy to misunderstand. Fellow Daoist, poor Wei, let me ask you. What are your intentions for going to the human race this time? Ignoring Xing Tian's complicated emotions, Fengdu Ghost Emperor asked him directly. To use Xuanyuan's hand to break the limit. Xing Tian replied. Then, do you have the confidence to win? Fengdu Ghost Emperor continued to ask. Yes. When he said the word yes, Xing Tian's tone was unusually firm. It was obvious that he was confident. According to what you said, you are going to break through the realm, not to destroy the relationship between the two races. In that case, why are you hesitating? After the battle with human Emperor Xianyuan, if you successfully break the limit, you will be able to reach a higher realm. At that time, who will think that you are here to kill the human emperor? All living beings will think that you are here to achieve the Tao. Xianyuan has not fallen, and you have not fallen, and you have even advanced further with the help of this. Under such circumstances, how can the friendship between the two races be damaged? The truth is exactly the opposite. If such a situation really happens, not only will the friendship between the two races not be affected, but it will also become closer. But under such circumstances, Xing Tian, you are hesitating. Does this mean that, you, Xing Tian, don't have the confidence to win as you said? At the end of his words, Fengdu Ghost Emperor's tone became more and more severe. It was like a heavy hammer, hammering Xing Tian's heart word by word. Thank you for your advice, brother Daoist. Xing Tian understands. Fengdu Ghost Emperor's words were like a bolt from the blue. They resounded in Xing Tian's mind and completely extinguished all his hesitation. Yes. As long as he successfully broke his limit in the battle with Xianyuan and was not killed by him, or he did not kill Xianyuan. Then, the two of them would be friends based on martial arts. Since that was the case, the relationship between the two races would not be damaged because of this. On the contrary, this was proof of their close relationship. After thinking through this point, Xing Tian could not help but be enlightened. There was no longer a trace of hesitation in his heart. Endless fighting spirit emerged and completely filled his entire heart. Then, he bowed respectfully to the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu and said, "Thank you. Xing Tian will definitely return successfully in this battle." After saying that, Xing Tian turned and left the imperial palace, rushing towards the human race. Xing Tian, have you really made up your mind? You have to know, your next action concerns the future relationship between the human race and the sorcerer race, and also the future safety of the untainted land. So, you can only succeed this time. You are not allowed to fail. Otherwise, there will be a long war between the human race and the sorcerer race, which will affect the entire untainted land. The untainted land will change because of you, and billions of people will die because of you. And you, Xing Tian, will be the fuse of everything. You will become the sinner of the sorcerer race, and even the entire untainted land. In the face of such consequences, I wonder if you, Xing Tian, can really maintain the belief that you will definitely win? On the Emperor's throne, Fengdu Ghost Emperor's deep voice came slowly. It was like a heavy hammer that fell on Xing Tian's heart, bringing him heavy pressure. In a trance, the scene of the great battle between the human race and the sorcerer race seemed to appear in front of Xing Tian's eyes. Endless magical powers were unleashed, mountains and rivers were shattered, and countless people died tragically. The wails and cries kept echoing in his ears. It was like crying and complaining, as if it was accusing him. It was because of his actions that countless tragedies happened in the human world. For a moment, Xing Tian's body seemed to be pressed down by thousands of immortal divine mountains. His footsteps became extremely heavy. But even so, it could not shake Xing Tian's footsteps. Xing Tian will definitely succeed this time. I will definitely not let this result be reflected in reality. A shout came from Xing Tian's mouth, representing his incomparably firm belief. Then, a bright light rose from Xing Tian's body and enveloped him, piercing through all the illusions. That light was the most moving light. It was even more dazzling than the sun. It was so dazzling that people could not look directly at it. Even the powerful Fengdu Ghost Emperor, who was comparable to a primordial chaos expert, could not help but look sideways at it and marvel at its greatness. This was the light of faith. His appearance had nothing to do with strength. This was a realm of the soul. Only when one's Tao heart was pure to a certain extent could it be reflected. Under that unparalleled pressure, Xing Tian's fighting spirit did not weaken. Instead, it rose higher and higher. It was as if that huge pressure had brought him unparalleled motivation. The combination of his state of mind and fighting spirit made Xing Tian's belief become more and more firm. As a result, it underwent a transformation and gave birth to the light of faith. And this was the beginning of breaking the limit. The appearance of the light of faith marked the beginning of Xing Tian's transformation. Once his transformation was completed, he would be the new primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian of the primordial world, an existence like a Tao Lord. The battle with Shenyuan was the opportunity for him to transform. This battle, Xing Tian would complete a gorgeous transformation. He believed that after a period of time, the primordial world would once again give birth to an existence that would shock the future. Is this really okay? With such a huge pressure on his shoulders, can Xing Tian really successfully break the limit and complete the transformation? Not long after Xing Tian left, the Lady of Earth walked out of the dark and asked the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu worriedly. It turned out that from the beginning to the end, the Lady of Earth had been hiding in the dark and silently watching the development of the situation. That was true, it was related to Xing Tian, the number one magus below the ancestral magus. How could the Lady of Earth not come? Empress, there's no need to worry. Believe in Xing Tian. That pressure can suppress anyone, but it can't suppress Xing Tian. Instead, it will stimulate his fighting spirit and make him even stronger. Isn't the light of faith the best proof? Unlike the Lady of Earth's worries, the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu was full of confidence in Xing Tian. After all, he was the first man to be crowned as the God of War in the later generations. That's true. As the first great magus to be born in an existence that was favored by Pangu's axe, Xing Tian's potential is far beyond our imagination. He is not inferior to us ancestral magi at all. Looking at the axe in Xing Tian's hand, the Lady of Earth nodded thoughtfully. Chapter 630. Xing Tian. He was the most special existence in the wizard tribe. He was the first great wizard born from Pangu's heart, and the most powerful wizard besides the ancestral wizard. Of course, Xing Tian was special not because he was the first great wizard, but because of the Xingtian axe in his hand. Although the Xingtian axe was only an upper-grade primordial spiritual treasure, its killing power was not inferior to any supreme-grade primordial spiritual treasure. Even the physical body of a primordial chaos expert could be broken open by him. And all of this was because the Xingtian axe was formed from part of the fragments of Pangu's axe. Back then, the ultimate treasure of the chaos, Pangu's axe, was shattered because it couldn't withstand the backlash of the world. Its main body evolved into the three ultimate treasures of the world, while the remaining fragments were scattered in the untainted world and evolved into various special connate spiritual treasures. And the Xingtian axe was the most powerful of these primordial spiritual treasures. Back then, Xing Tian was born with the axe, which shocked the 12 ancestral wizards. Being born with the fragments of Pangu's axe was a treatment that even Pangu's son, the ancestral wizard, had never enjoyed. In a sense, Xing Tian was someone who had obtained Pangu's approval. His future was destined to be brilliant. Because of this, Xing Tian's status in the wizard tribe was somewhat aloof, second only to the 12 ancestral wizards. After all, in the world, those who could be recognized by Pangu, how many? Xing Tian had such an honor, which showed that he was extraordinary. Thinking of this, Huda's confidence in Xing Tian increased greatly. She was sure that he would break the limit, surpass the past, and step into a new realm. Thinking that the wizard tribe would soon have a great existence at the level of the primordial chaos path master, even with her cultivation, Huda could not help but feel happy. Taoist Zichen. Under your stimulation, Xing Tian's state of mind has changed, and his strength has far surpassed the past. Under such circumstances, with Xuanyuan's strength, is there any hope of forcing Xing Tian to his limit? In addition to being happy, Huda could not help but feel a little worried. The current Xing Tian's strength had already reached its peak. Even compared to the grand shaman of the past, he was not inferior. Xuanyuan, on the other hand, had cultivated for less than 1,000,000 years. His half-step primordial chaos strength had been forcefully promoted by the human race's providence. In terms of comprehension of heaven and earth, battle experience, mastery of divine abilities, and so on, he was far inferior to Xing Tian. Compared to Xing Tian, Xuanyuan's only advantage was the Xuanyuan sword in his hand. However, the heaven-punishing axe, it might not be inferior to the current Xuanyuan sword. The gap between the two sides was so huge that Goddess Huda couldn't help but worry. Could Xuanyuan really fight against Xing Tian? If Xuanyuan was no match for Xing Tian and couldn't push him to his limits, then all his previous efforts would have been in vain. Therefore, the Lady of Earth couldn't help but worry. Haha. Let's see if Xuanyuan can force Xingtian to his limits. After a few laughs, the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu said leisurely. How could there be such a huge loophole in his plan? After all, Xuanyuan was not alone. He had the entire human race behind him. He was the enemy of Xuanyuan. He was the enemy of the entire human race. Not to mention that Xing Tian's current strength was only comparable to the ancestral shaman of the past. Even if Dijiang was reborn, he might not be able to defeat the entire human race. The current human race was no longer the human race of the ancient times that was at the mercy of the demon race. After the efforts of the ancestors of the human race was already worthy of being the untainted world's overlord. On the shore of the East Sea, Xing Tian held a giant axe in his hand and charged over with hatred. He wanted to chop down human Emperor Xuanyuan with his axe. Human Emperor Xuanyuan was not afraid of this. Even if it was Xing Tian, who had been famous for a long time in the ancient times, he still dared to raise his sword and face it. Rumble. Boundless sword intent bloomed from the Xuanyuan sword. It was vast and majestic, covering the entire void and forcefully repelling the Xing Tian axe that was chopping down. Xing Tian, you're too presumptuous. Chio's death was his own fault. How can you blame him? Moreover, how to deal with Chiyu is an internal matter of the human race. What does it have to do with you? Xing Tian, retreat quickly. Considering the friendship between the human race and the witch race, I won't argue with you about this matter. You'd better retreat quickly. Don't make a mistake and hurt the friendship between the two races. Rising into the sky, Xianyuan shouted at Xing Tian. Even at this point, Xianyuan still didn't want to attack Xing Tian because of the friendship between the witch race and the human race. Therefore, he advised him to retreat. Unfortunately, although Xuanyuan's intention was good, Xing Tian, who had come to cause trouble, didn't care about his explanation. In fact, no matter what Xianyuan said, Xing Tian would attack. The so-called revenge of Qiyu was just an excuse to attack Xianyuan. Others didn't know, but how could he not know the real situation of Qiyu? Hee, what a stubborn guy. Let me see if your body is as stubborn as your mouth. As he spoke, Xing Tian waved the Xing Tian axe in his hand again and chopped towards Xianyuan. But this time, perhaps Xuanyuan's words had some effect. Xing Tian chose to fight in the depths of the void instead of the ancestral land of the human race. In this way, the aftermath of the battle wouldn't affect the ancestral land of the human race. Boom! 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 As soon as the two of them fought, a terrifying wave erupted, almost destroying everything and shaking the long river of time. Almost at the moment the battle began, the mighty figures and great magicians of the entire untainted land sensed the terrifying battle that had erupted in the depths of the void. Therefore, they released their divine thoughts in surprise and bewilderment, peeping into the depths of the void. They wanted to see which two powerful existences had broken out in a great battle. Then, everyone saw a scene that they couldn't believe. Human Emperor Xianyuan and Great Witch Xing Tian. They were fighting. And, looking at their posture, it didn't seem like they were sparring, but rather, it seemed like they were fighting to the death. This was interesting. The witch race and the human race had always been close allies. Now, the leaders of the two races suddenly fought in the depths of the void, fighting to the death. Did this mean that the relationship between the witch race and the human race was on the verge of collapse? What they saw, everyone couldn't help but think so. They just didn't know why the two races suddenly fell out with each other. However, although they were curious, it didn't affect their mood to watch a good show. The human race was the new overlord of the untainted land. The witch race was the old overlord of the untainted land. The leaders of the two races fought. It represented the confrontation between the old and new overlords of the untainted land. It was rare to see such a scene. Moreover, apart from the identities of the two sides, just the two half-step primordial chaos experts fighting to the death was worth watching. Watching the experts fight was also an opportunity for everyone. It could be of great help. One side was the undisputed overlord of the untainted land, and the other side was a great magician who had shaken the untainted land in the ancient times. The battle between the two could be said to have attracted everyone's anticipation. No matter why Xianyuan and Xing Tian fought, the experts of the myriad races were extremely excited. If one had to say who was the happiest about the break between the human race and the witch race, it would be the experts of the myriad races. Xianyuan forced them to leave the untainted land, forcing them to a dead end. As a result, the experts of the myriad races had the intention to rebel and make Xianyuan pay the price. If Xing Tian hadn't taken action first, the experts of the myriad races would have joined forces to attack Xianyuan. Of course, it was also because of Xing Tian's action that the experts of the myriad races changed their minds. They didn't act rashly and waited for the situation to develop. They knew how powerful Xing Tian was. If he took action, Xianyuan might not be his match. He might be killed by Xing Tian. In this way, wouldn't everyone be happy? Xianyuan had fallen, so who would take his orders to heart? If Xing Tian lost and was killed by Xianyuan, wouldn't that be even better? Xing Tian still had the two great gods behind him, ancestral witch Xianming and Saint Hudu. Seeing that Xing Tian was killed by Xianyuan, how could they not take revenge? When that time came, Xianyuan should be worried about how to resist the revenge of the two great gods, instead of focusing on how to force them out of the untainted land. Clang! After a crisp sound, the Xianyuan sword and the Xingtian axe collided fiercely. In an instant, a terrifying power erupted and swept through everything. The depths of the void were stirred up into a mess, and the void turbulence was everywhere. Bang! After the attack, Xianyuan only felt a strong force surging from the Xianyuan sword. First, it cracked his thumb and index finger, and then it fiercely split him apart, crashing into the void turbulence. Huff! Huff! After a long while, Xianyuan crawled out of the void turbulence, breathing heavily. Under this attack, although he didn't suffer any injuries, his posture was a little embarrassing. In terms of realm, with the blessing of the human race, Xianyuan wasn't necessarily weaker than Xing Tian, and even faintly surpassed him. However, as everyone knew, the most powerful thing about the witch race was their physical bodies, not their magic power or realm. Xing Tian's physical body had been tempered for countless years. One could imagine how powerful it was. In the entire untainted land, there weren't many people whose physical bodies were stronger than his. What about Xianyuan? The fate of the human race could only improve his cultivation realm and bring him endless magic power. As for his physical body, the fate of the human race couldn't do anything. He needed to temper it himself. Then, without a doubt, Xuanyuan's physical body was tempered by himself. It definitely couldn't compare to Xing Tian's physical body. Therefore, in the battle just now, the huge gap between their physical bodies was directly reflected. Xing Tian's strength was far greater than Xuanyuan's, which was why he was sent flying with one blow. Similarly, this also made Xianyuan understand, if he fought with Xing Tian in close combat, he would definitely lose. Haha. The so-called human emperor, the strongest person in the untainted land, is this all you've got? Seeing that Xianyuan was repelled by his attack, Xing Tian couldn't help but mock him. This human emperor was too useless. He couldn't even take one blow from him. How could he give him the pressure to break through his limits? Humph. Facing Xing Tian's ridicule, Xianyuan snorted coldly and raised his sword again. However, this time, he had fully learned his lesson from the last time. He didn't fight with Xing Tian in close combat. Instead, he chose to attack from a distance and compete with Xing Tian's magic power. Xianyuan waved the Xianyuan sword in his hand at Xing Tian from a long distance. Swish, 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 swish. In an instant, an infinite sword intent burst out. It was extremely sharp, as if it could cut through everything. It swept towards Xing Tian in an overwhelming manner. In terms of sword magic, the human race had received the true teachings of Feng Zichen. Every move and style of Xianyuan contained a huge amount of power, which was compatible with the innate sword magic. The sword light surged over like the trajectory of the Great Path, which could cut through everything. It was extremely terrifying. Haha. Good. Now it's worth watching. Although the sword light was strong, Xing Tian was even fiercer. He raised the Xingtian axe in his hand and directly chopped at the sword light that was surging over. Compared to Xuanyuan's exquisite sword magic, Xing Tian's movements were a little simple. However, the Great Path was simple. Although Xing Tian's movements were simple, they all exerted his strength to the extreme. Xing Tian's axe chopped down, and what erupted was the purest physical strength, without a trace of impurities. Every strike was filled with the beauty of strength. As the saying goes, a strong person can defeat 10 skilled people. When one's strength was strong enough, there was nothing that he couldn't destroy. Therefore, Xing Tian's axe chopped down, and an infinite amount of power erupted, cutting the dazzling sword light into pieces on the spot. It turned into light spots that filled the sky and dissipated into thin air. What a strong physical body. In the distance, Xianyuan, who saw this scene, couldn't help but twitch the corner of his eyes. With his eyesight, it wasn't difficult to see that Xing Tian didn't use any magic power in this attack. He only used the strength of his physical body. That was why it was so frightening. He was so strong without using magic power. If he used magic power, how strong would he be? Thinking of this, Xianyuan didn't dare to hold back. He immediately urged the luck of the human race to increase his strength to the limit. Ha! After a deep roar, wisps of fire suddenly rose from Xuanyuan's body and shone with the brilliance of the human path. In an instant, Xuanyuan's entire body changed. The mighty power of the human path filled his body, distorting space and time, emitting an infinite majesty. He was stronger, was infinitely close to the primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian. Kill. Infinite power surged in his body, causing Xuanyuan's confidence to increase greatly. He raised his sword and charged towards Xing Tian again. Swish swish swish, almost at the same time, countless sword lights that were even more vast and fierce than before bloomed from the Xinyuan sword. They shot towards Xing Tian at an even faster speed. In an instant, the sword light had already arrived beside Xing Tian. So fast, seeing the sword light coming towards him, Xing Tian was about to resist when he felt that the sword light had completely enveloped him. Dang 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 dang, the sound of iron being forged came from Xing Tian's body. It was the sound of the sword light slashing on Xing Tian's body. After a long while, the power of the sword light was finally exhausted and slowly dissipated into the void. At the same time, Xing Tian's figure was revealed. Miserable. At this moment, Xing Tian could only be described as miserable. His clothes had been completely shredded by the sword light. His entire body looked bloody, and there was not a single piece of good flesh on his body. It was as if he had been dismembered. Chapter 631. With the support of the human Dao light, the power of Xuanyuan's attack was raised to the limit, breaking Xing Tian's almost invincible body. But even so, it was useless. Haha. Pain, I haven't felt it in a long time. Xing Tian was not angry that his body was broken. Instead, he became more and more excited. Because, under Xuanyuan's attack, he felt a pressure that he hadn't felt since the battle between the Lich and the demon. And the pressure was the driving force that forced him to improve. The battle has only just begun. Xing Tian muttered. Suddenly, boundless magic power surged from his body and wrapped around the sword wound. Then, a shocking change occurred. Wherever the dermic power passed, the remaining sword intent on Xing Tian's wound seemed to have suffered a huge blow and collapsed. His broken body was reborn as a result. In an instant, Xing Tian's injury was completely healed. There was no trace of injury at all. Only the torn clothes were still hanging on Xing Tian's body, as if to prove the existence of the battle just now. This is indestructible body. The supreme ability to be reborn from a drop of blood? In the void in the distance, Xinyuan couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice when he saw the changes on Xing Tian's body. He was very familiar with this method. This was because it wasn't a supreme ability passed down by the Wu tribe, but a supreme ability that was naturally obtained when the path of gods and demons was cultivated to a very high level. When the path of gods and demons was cultivated to a very high level, the physical body would be integrated with the great path, so that part of the characteristics of the indestructible true spirit would be obtained. Even if the physical body was broken or destroyed, as long as there was a trace of blood left, the physical body could be reformed. The reason why Xinyuan was familiar with this ability was that the two emperors before him, Fuxi and Shenong, could easily do this. In other words, the physical body was attached to the great path to achieve the state of immortality. That was the ability of the path of gods and demons to cultivate to the realm of the primordial Daluo Jinxian and prove the true body of the Pangu. This was the symbol of the path of gods and demons. It was because of this that Xinyuan was surprised at this moment. Although Xing Tian's current strength was infinitely close to that of the primordial Daluo Jinxian, no matter how close he wasn't the primordial Daluo Jinxian. He was always a hair's breadth. Therefore, logically speaking, Xing Tian shouldn't be able to do this. In fact, only Dijiang had truly relied on his own strength to reach this step and cultivate into the fiend god Daolord realm. Even Fengzhi couldn't do this without the help of external help. Therefore, it was obvious how difficult it was to do this. If Feng Zichen, the founder of the fiend god Dao, couldn't do it, how could Xing Tian do it? Could it be that his achievements in the path of gods and demons were greater than Bin Feng Zichen, the founder? Xing was Dijiang, Dijiang god divinity, Dijiang. Dijiang, Dijiang. That's not right. If Xing Tian could do this without paying a price, he would have become the primordial Daluo Jinxian long ago. How could he be trapped in the half-step primordial chaos realm like he is now? Xianyuan felt that Xing Tian's method of repairing his body must have some flaws, and it wasn't without a price. Otherwise, if there were no restrictions, he would have become a Dao long ago. This method was really the same as that of the primordial Daluo Jinxian. Kill. Thinking of this, Xianyuan waved the Xianyuan sword in his hand and activated a dazzling sword light that charged towards Xing Tian from afar. He wanted to injure Xing Tian's body again so that when he repaired his body, he could see the flaw of this method or the price he had to pay when using this method. The sword light was dazzling and powerful. It arrived in front of Xing Tian at a speed that surpassed time and space. However, it was this incomparably powerful sword that did not work. He was blocked by Xing Tian. It was the same move. In a situation where they were on guard, how could Xing Tian be hit a second time? Just now, it was Xuanyuan's sudden outburst that caught Xing Tian off guard. He was slashed by the sword light and his body was injured. Now that Xing Tian was on guard, if he was hit by Xianyuan again, he would really become a joke. Rumble. Xing Tian shook the Xingtian axe in his hand, and an extremely terrifying force, accompanied by strands of innate baleful aura, surged out from the axe and rushed straight towards the sword light. In the blink of an eye, it was completely drowned and swallowed. Kill. After shattering the sword light, there was no joy on Xing Tian's face. Instead, he became more and more manic. He raised the axe in his hand and pounced towards Xianyuan. It had always been him, Xing Tian, who suppressed others. When had it been others' turn to suppress him? It was simply unbearable. Humph. Seeing Xing Tian charging towards him, Xianyuan released sword qi to block his footsteps while retreating quickly, widening the distance between him and Xing Tian. He still remembered, he still had a chance to win in a long-range battle, he would definitely lose in a close-range battle. No matter how strong Xing Tian was, he was still in the depths of the void. He couldn't stand on the ground, so he couldn't obtain a steady stream of power from it. His power had a limit after all. But Xianyuan was different. With the blessing of the human race, his power was truly endless. In a long-range battle of attrition, Xing Tian really couldn't outlast him. One side wanted to fight in close range, while the other side wanted to fight in a long-range battle. The two sides chased each other and pulled each other in the depths of the void. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed. In other words, the two sides had been fighting for 1,000 years. And after 1,000 years, the gap between the two sides had also been revealed. It could be seen that when the two sides fought, Xing Tian could no longer wield the giant axe in his hand as smoothly as before. He was tired. After 1,000 years of high-intensity battle, even with Xing Tian's strength, he couldn't hold on any longer. Every time he waved the Xingtian axe, he felt that his arms were extremely heavy, and he needed to spend more energy. Xing Tian's mana was about to run out. At this point in the battle, the reason why Xing Tian was still able to hold on was because of his unwavering faith. As long as his faith didn't fall, Xing Tian wouldn't fall. And Xianyuan? His situation was the opposite of Xing Tian's. After 1,000 years of battle, not only was Xianyuan not tired, but he was even more energetic. Moreover, his moves were more natural than before. His mastery of magic had also increased by a large margin. Obviously, after 1,000 years of battle, Xuanyuan's strength had improved greatly. That's right. Anyone who was fed moves by an existence of the same realm for 1,000 years would improve greatly. Over the past 1,000 years, Xianyuan obviously hadn't been in vain. Under the pressure of Xing Tian, he had a more perfect grasp of his own strength. He was already able to perfectly control the huge strength that the human race's fortune had blessed him. In the past, with the blessing of the human race's fortune, although Xianyuan had strength that was not inferior to the half-step primordial chaos realm. But his own realm had only just touched the level of sage to be. With a weak body, he could control strength that was far beyond his own. It would be strange if Xianyuan could perfectly control it. In other words, although Xianyuan had the strength of a half-step primordial chaos realm, he couldn't perfectly exert this strength because his level was too low. But now, with Xing Tian's help, everything was different. After 1,000 years of high-intensity training, Xianyuan had adapted to his own strength and could perfectly control it. This also showed that the current Xianyuan was a qualified half-step primordial chaos realm master. After perfectly exerting his own strength, Xuanyuan's strength increased greatly. Although he still couldn't defeat Xing Tian in close combat, Xing Tian gradually lost to him in long-range combat. Boom! 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 Because of his limitless power, every strike of Xuanyuan's was an all-out strike. What about Xing Tian? In order to resist Xuanyuan's attack, he had to use all his strength. But he didn't have Xuanyuan's endless strength. Therefore, every time he attacked with his full strength, it was a huge burden for Xing Tian. With such a high-intensity battle, Xing Tian gradually became unable to withstand it. This was the reason why Xing Tian gradually lost to Xianyuan after 1,000 years of battle. It wasn't that Xing Tian was inferior to Xianyuan. Xianyuan was really cheating. Of course, if Xing Tian was willing to draw upon the blessing of the witch race, he could also reach Xuanyuan's level. But that would violate his original intention of pushing himself to the limit. Therefore, Xing Tian didn't do it. Whoosh! Just as Xing Tian's strength was gradually weakening, Xianyuan seized the opportunity and slashed down with his sword. A huge wound was cut in Xing Tian's chest, almost cutting Xing Tian's body diagonally in half. Puchi! Dazzling divine blood sprayed out from Xing Tian's chest like a fountain, and it emanated intense fluctuations of divinity that dyed the sky red. Damn it! Enduring the pain in his chest, Xing Tian first knocked away Xuanyuan's sword with his axe, then opened his mouth and sucked hard in front of him. Suddenly, the divine blood spurting out from Xing Tian's chest stopped abruptly. Then, as if time was flowing backward, it flowed back into Xing Tian's body from the void. Whoosh! A divine light flashed, and the injuries on Xing Tian's body completely disappeared, as if he had never been injured. Of course, there was a price to pay for such a fast recovery. After the injuries disappeared, Xing Tian's aura was undoubtedly much weaker than before. Seeing this scene in the distance, Xuanyuan's heart skipped a beat. He seemed to have noticed something, but he wasn't sure. Therefore, he continued to control Xuanyuan's sword to attack Xing Tian, to bring more injuries to Xing Tian so that he could confirm his guess. Xing Tian's spiritual power was gradually depleted. His movements were no longer as smooth as before, so Xianyuan was able to find many flaws. Puff! Not long after, Xianyuan seized the opportunity and injured Xing Tian again. Xuanyuan's sword came slashing down, almost cutting Xing Tian in half. After forcing Xuanyuan's sword away with his axe, Xing Tian continued to use magic to repair his body. However, compared to before, the time he spent repairing his physical body this time was much longer than the previous time. Seeing this, Xianyuan was finally certain that the price Xing Tian had to pay to repair his physical body was his mana and origin. Every time he repaired his body, Xing Tian would consume a large amount of spiritual power and a small part of his origin. If he was at his peak, the spiritual power and origin needed to repair his body would be nothing to him. But at this moment, Xing Tian's spiritual power was almost depleted. It wouldn't be as easy to repair his body as before, unless he was willing to consume his origin. But while spiritual power was easy to obtain, origin was difficult to obtain. If one's spiritual power was depleted, they could cultivate it back at any time. But if one's origin was depleted, it would really be gone. The price was too great. This was the difference between Xing Tian and the Celestial Demon Path Master. The Tao of the Celestial Demon Path Master was imprinted in heaven and earth. If his body was destroyed, the Tao imprinted in heaven and earth would spontaneously absorb the power of heaven and earth to reform his body. This was the true definition of being immortal and indestructible. It wouldn't consume his origin or spiritual power. To kill such a person, other than committing suicide, like Dijiang, the only other way was to suppress him and refine him over a long period of time. The less spiritual power, the greater Xing Tian's flaws, and the more times he was slashed by the Xianyuan sword. In the process of recovering his physical body, Xing Tian's dermic powers were quickly depleted. But even without spiritual power, Xing Tian's body was still powerful, far from what Xianyuan could contend with. Therefore, Xianyuan didn't let down his guard just because Xing Tian's spiritual power was depleted. He still chose to continue attacking from afar. Swish swish swish, the Xianyuan sword slashed down quickly, leaving huge wounds on Xing Tian's body, cutting him into a bloody mess. But Xing Tian was still too strong. Every time the Xianyuan sword left, divine light would rise from his body and repair his body. That was the power of origin. Xing Tian, who had lost his spiritual power, chose to repair his body with his origin. Of course, this wasn't Xing Tian's original intention. It was a spontaneous action after his body was injured. His body didn't have intelligence, so he couldn't tell the difference between spiritual power and origin. He only knew that after being injured, he had to repair his body as soon as possible. If he had spiritual power, he would use spiritual power. If he didn't, he would use origin. Anyway, as long as he could use it, he would use it. And Xing Tian couldn't stop the actions of his body. Because this was the price he had to pay to cultivate an indestructible body. Or rather, this was the side effect of an indestructible body. He hadn't reached the realm of a divine demon Dao Lord, but he had some of the characteristics of a divine demon Dao Lord. Of course, he had to pay a price. And the predicament Xing Tian was facing now was the price he had to pay. In the blink of an eye, another 1,000 years had passed. Xianyuan had also slashed Xing Tian for 1,000 years. However, other than Xing Tian's aura becoming more dispirited, there weren't many changes. Because Xing Tian's origin was too dense. That's right. If a half-step primordial chaos expert was so easy to kill, then he wouldn't be worthy of being called the peak of the world. After slashing Xing Tian for 1,000 years, Xianyuan couldn't help but feel a little tired. Therefore, he tried to persuade him to surrender. Xing Tian, will you surrender? Even now, Xianyuan wasn't willing to kill Xing Tian. Chapter 632. Because the price of killing Xing Tian was too great. At the very least, the alliance between the witch tribe and the demon tribe, which had lasted for an eon, would be broken because of this. Surrender? Xianyuan, do you really think you've won? With a mocking smile on his face, Xing Tian replied faintly. He hadn't lost yet. So what if he didn't have magic power? He still had a strong origin and that invincible belief. These would always support him, so that he wouldn't fall. Being at a disadvantage, not only did it not dampen Xing Tian's fighting spirit, but it also stimulated the ferocity hidden in his bones. Kill! Xing Tian roared, and his body shook. Boundless innate baleful aura surged out of his body, almost engulfing everything. Whoosh whoosh with Xing Tian as the center, the dark purple sorcerer baleful aura swept out in all directions. It was vast and mighty, eroding everything around it. Wherever it passed, everything turned into nothingness and was swallowed up. Even the powerful Xianyuan sword didn't dare to fight head-on with such a powerful baleful aura. Therefore, the moment the baleful aura spread, the Xianyuan sword retracted its sword intent and returned to Xuanyuan's hand. The innate baleful aura of the witch tribe was much stronger than the innate baleful aura of the witch tribe inherited from the chaos demon god. The baleful aura of the witch tribe could be said to be the #1 baleful aura of the primordial world. Panga's Dutian divine baleful aura was said to be the #1 baleful aura of the chaos. The baleful aura of the witch tribe, who had inherited his bloodline, could be imagined how powerful it was. In addition, when the witch tribe was born, they were tainted with the baleful aura of the heavens. Therefore, the two extremely high-level innate baleful auras merged in the body of the witch tribe, giving birth to an even more powerful innate baleful aura that belonged to the witch tribe, the baleful aura of the witch tribe. From the origin of the baleful aura of the witch tribe, one could see how powerful it was. If it was accidentally tainted by it, even the powerful Xianyuan sword wouldn't have an easy time. Although it wouldn't be destroyed, its spirituality would be greatly damaged. Therefore, Xianyuan hurriedly took back his Xianyuan sword. He didn't dare to let his sword touch the qi of sorcery, so he attacked with his sword qi. No matter how strong the evil spirit was, it had a limit. It couldn't erode the Xianyuan sword with the sword chi when it couldn't touch it, could it? If the sorcerer chi could really do that, the sorcerer clan would have unified the untainted world a long time ago. They would not have ended up dying together with the demon clan. As the baleful sorcery chi erupted, Xing Tian turned the tables and broke free from the Xianyuan sword's seal. Kill. As soon as he was free, Xing Tian rushed towards Xianyuan without hesitation. Humph. Since you insist, don't blame me for being heartless. Seeing Xing Tian like this, Xianyuan knew that it was hard to change his mind. At that moment, he didn't hesitate any longer. He was determined to kill Xing Tian. If he could kill them, then he would. If he couldn't kill him, then he would suppress him. Sword of Humanity, kill. Xianyuan made up his mind. He raised the Xianyuan sword in his hand and swung it down in the direction of Xing Tian. Rumble. In the sky above the river of destiny, the fate of the human clan vibrated. Boundless power descended and blessed the Xianyuan sword. With this help, the power of the Xianyuan sword instantly soared. Endless radiance of humanity bloomed. It was incomparably dazzling. It bloomed from the Xianyuan sword and turned into a torch. It burned fiercely and ignited the sword light. Whoosh! A beam of sword light that was surrounded by torch flame shot out from the Xianyuan sword and slashed towards Xing Tian in a mighty manner. As the torch burned, one could see the shadows of countless races appearing. They were creating various civilizations and deducing great power. Boom! The torch boiled and deduced the power of civilization. It was incomparably powerful and was added to the sword light. It made the sword light look like a torrent of humanity. It surged forward and was unstoppable. Powerful, incomparably powerful. Xuanyuan's sword. What he slashed out was not sword light, but civilization. This was the history of civilization formed by countless civilizations. What he represented was the human Tao. This was a sword of humanity. Whoosh! The dazzling light of humanity erupted. It was like the sun, illuminating the past, present, and future. It was so dazzling that the powerful beings who were watching the battle couldn't help but squint their eyes. It seemed that, even as powerful as them, they couldn't look directly at the brilliance of humanity. The power of humanity was beyond imagination. Bang! In the distant nether realm, where the 6 paths of reincarnation were. After seeing the elegance of this sword strike, even the powerful goddess Hudu couldn't help but change her expression and stand up from the futon. The power of Xuanyuan's sword strike, with the support of the light of humanity, could pose a threat to her, let alone Xing Tian. Perhaps, this sword strike could seriously injure Xing Tian, or even kill him. The power of this sword strike had already reached the level of primordial chaos. Rumble. The sword light arrived with a loud bang and drowned Xing Tian in the blink of an eye. Squeak. Squeak. Accompanied by the light of humanity, the torch burned to its heart's content and devoured Xing Tian entirely. It wanted to use the power of humanity to completely purify him and completely disappear into the primordial world. The destruction of humanity. This was the true destruction of humanity. However, Xianyuan had a trump card that could injure primordial chaos. However, Xing Tian was able to live from ancient times until now and survive countless years without falling. The trump card in his hand might not be weak. Xing Tian was surrounded by the torch, but he didn't show the slightest fear. He only gripped the heaven-punishing axe in his hand even harder. Split open the heavens. Xing Tian raised the heaven-punishing axe in his hand with all his might. He roared and slashed horizontally in front of him. Rumble. In an instant, endless brilliance, it bloomed from the heaven-punishing axe. The brilliance was like the light of the creation of heaven and earth. It was even more resplendent and dazzling than the light of humanity. Moreover, as the brilliance circulated, it contained endless mysteries. Billions of great Tao were born and destroyed within it, as if it was describing the profundity of the creation of heaven and earth. Puchi. The brilliance of the brilliance was also beyond imagination. As soon as it appeared, it pierced through the light of humanity and swept away the raging torch, causing the sword light to be pushed back continuously. This was the power of splitting open the heavens. Without a doubt, the brilliance that bloomed from the heaven-punishing axe was the brilliance emitted by the power of splitting open the heavens. Only the power of splitting open the heavens and earth could suppress the light of humanity. The light of humanity was strong enough, wasn't it? When it appeared, it was so dazzling that the great masters narrowed their eyes. However, it was obvious that the power of splitting open the heavens was even more domineering. Facing it, the great masters couldn't even open their eyes. They would feel a burning sensation, as if it was going to burn their eyes. Even their divine senses, under the illumination of the light of splitting open the heavens, it was also like melting ice and snow, quickly dissipating into thin air. As a high-grade innate spirit treasure formed from the fragments of Pangu's axe, the heaven-punishing axe naturally had a part of the mark of splitting open the heavens. And this was Xing Tian's greatest trump card. Once the power of splitting open the heavens was used, unless the opponent had overwhelming strength, they would definitely be defeated by Xing Tian. This was a power that could reverse the universe. Once it was used, the situation immediately changed. Isn't it enough? Then let's be a little stronger. In the distant void, Xianyuan saw Xing Tian use the power of splitting open the heavens to force back the mighty power of humanity. Although he was a little surprised, he did not feel fear. Because he could still be stronger. The next attack would be the one that would decide the outcome of the battle. One strike to determine the outcome. If Xing Tian could block it, then Xianyuan would really have no more moves. After making up his mind, Xianyuan no longer held back. He was about to use his life-risking move to carry out the final blow. Then, he calmed his mind and quickly crossed the endless space and time. He entered the mysterious long river of destiny and merged with the human race's destiny. Then, Xianyuan followed the invisible connection and connected with the phoenix that represented the destiny of the bird race in the sky above the long river of destiny. Screech! The phoenix felt it and flapped its wings and let out a long cry. Its sound shook the entire long river of destiny. Boom! In the next moment, an extremely huge and ancient power crossed the endless space and time and blessed the Xianyuan sword in Xuanyuan's hand. Human Sacred Phoenix, /. In a trance, Xianyuan came back to his senses. He subconsciously raised the Xianyuan sword in his hand and slashed out the strongest sword strike he had ever cultivated. Screech! Under the brilliance of the Xianyuan sword, the long cry of the phoenix resounded throughout the primitive world, alarming countless great existences. Rumble! Dazzling seven-colored light bloomed from the Xianyuan sword as if it was burning. This is Nirvana's sacred fire. Ancestor Phoenix's innate ability. Whoosh! As the Nirvana's sacred fire twisted, a huge phoenix that was completely composed of seven-colored flames flew out of the Xianyuan sword. It carried the power of the bird race's destiny and flew toward Xing Tian. Boom! On the other side, the human sacred fire that was completely suppressed by the power of split the heavens suddenly received the help of the seven-colored phoenix. Its power immediately surged and directly suppressed the power of split the heavens. In an instant, the situation changed again. The power of split the heavens was suppressed. Under the suppression of the human sacred fire, it rapidly shrank and barely formed a defensive barrier to protect Xing Tian. Whoosh! 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 Xianhua burned fiercely and emitted endless heat that surged toward Xing Tian, who was enveloped by the power of split the heavens. For a moment, under the attack of Xianhua, the defensive barrier formed by the power of split the heavens immediately became dangerous. Xing Tian's axe desperately shone brilliantly to maintain the defensive barrier. However, from his trembling axe, it could be seen that he could not hold on for long. Xing Tian was about to lose. Under the joint attack of the human sacred fire and the phoenix sacred fire, he might really die. Of course, the power of split the heavens could not resist the power of the human sacred fire. This did not mean that the power of split the heavens was weak, but that Xing Tian's axe could not. After all, it was not the main body of Xing Tian's axe. The mark of split the heavens obtained by Xing Tian's axe was limited. Therefore, the power of split the heavens that he could unleash was not much. This also led to Xing Tian being suppressed by Xian Yuan. Am I going to lose? No, I can't lose. I haven't broken the limit yet. How can I lose now? Moreover, if I lose and am killed by Xian Yuan, then, how will the sorcerer race and the human race get along in the future? In a trance, Xing Tian thought of the situation after his failure and could not help but shiver. He completely woke up. He could not lose. Even if it was not for himself, but for the sorcerer race and the human race, he could still lose. I'm unwilling. Thinking of the terrifying future, Xing Tian did not allow himself to fail. Therefore, he stood up again. That was the power of faith. The unwavering faith in his heart brought him great strength, allowing him to stand up again. In Xing Tian's heart, his faith completely materialized, turning into the light of faith that appeared and swept away the surging fire. A miracle happened at this moment. The moment the light of faith appeared, Xing Tian's bloodline and the Xing Tian axe in his hand gradually resonated. Buzz buzz buzz. The power of split the heavens that surged out from the Xing Tian axe no longer spread out. Instead, it surged into Xing Tian's bloodline. Thump 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 thump. A huge heartbeat sounded from Xing Tian's chest. It was as if it resonated with the world. Every time it vibrated, it could echo with the world. Strength. Unparalleled strength emerged from Xing Tian's heart and flowed to all parts of his body along with his blood, soothing the fatigue of his body. At this moment, Xing Tian broke his own limit. Awakened the Pangu bloodline in his body. The ancient and great bloodline awakened in Xing Tian's body, bringing him a huge amount of strength and causing him to undergo a transformation. A transformation towards primordial Daluo Jingxian. In the battle with Xian Yuan, Xing Tian saw the hope of advancing to primordial Daluo Jingxian. But this was not enough. Hope, just hope. Whether it could be realized or not was still unknown. Therefore, he needed a hearty battle to vent the huge strength in his body and verify his own path so that he could speed up the process of his transformation. And the opponent that Xing Tian chose to fight was naturally Xian Yuan. Break. With a deep roar, Xing Tian unleashed the unparalleled power within his body. Immediately, the world wailed incessantly, the great Tao laws trembled incessantly, as if they had encountered an extremely terrifying existence. Under this majestic strength, the brilliance of the human path that drowned Xing Tian completely disappeared in an instant. Although the power of the human path was one of the three strongest supreme powers in the primordial world and had the ability to suppress everything. However, Pangu's strength could even break through the chaos. It was clearly beyond the scope of heaven and earth. In this way, under the same conditions, how could the power of the human path fight against Pangu's strength? He was completely suppressed and beaten up. Okay. Xian Yuan, you've beaten me for so long. Now it's my turn to attack. With a loud laugh, Xing Tian pounced on Xian Yuan and fought with him. This time, facing Xing Tian who had awakened Pangu's bloodline, Xian Yuan was no match for him at all. His strength had been restrained by Xing Tian from the beginning to the end. How could he fight? Therefore, Xian Yuan was completely suppressed by Xing Tian. Soon, he was beaten black and blue. Only Xian Yuan had the blessing of the human race. His true spirit was eternally solid. No matter how much he was injured, his foundation would not be damaged. Otherwise, with Xing Tian's fighting style, he would have been broken long ago. Too slow. After Xing Tian awakened, Xian Yuan was no match for him at all. In that case, how can I give him enough pressure to help him speed up the time of his transformation? Chapter 633. Forget it. Why don't I lend him a hand? It's time for this show to come to an end. On the Emperor Star, Feng Zichen shook his head and decided to intervene in this battle to put a perfect end to it. Zichen's sword, go. With a thought, Feng Zichen raised his hand. Suddenly, boundless starlight gathered and turned into a purple transparent longsword. It broke through layers of void and flew towards Shenyuan. Sword Dao condensed, starlight formed a body. This was the shadow of the Zichen sword, and also the supreme sword Dao magic of the ancestor of the Xiantian sword Dao. This sword was invincible under the primordial chaos. Shua, during the battle between Shenyuan and Xingtian, the shadow of the Zichen sword quietly came and fell into the Shenyuan sword in Xuanyuan's hand and disappeared. Boom! Immediately, Shenyuan felt that the Shenyuan sword in his hand was different. Strong, too strong. Holding him, it was as if he had held the entire Xiantian sword Dao and could easily destroy the world. Buzz, 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 almost subconsciously, Shenyuan gently waved the Shenyuan sword in his hand. Then, a surprising scene happened. An incomparably magnificent sword light bloomed from the Shenyuan sword. It was like the trajectory of the great Dao, sweeping towards Xingtian in a mighty manner. Wherever the sword light passed, everything turned into nothingness. Kill! Seeing the sword light coming, Xingtian raised his axe to meet it. Boom! Following that, a loud explosion was heard. The might of that sword strike had actually forced Xingtian back. As soon as the sword light came into contact with the Xingtian axe, Xingtian felt an unparalleled power coming from the Xingtian axe, forcing him to retreat uncontrollably. Boom! 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 A powerful force burst forth, causing Xingtian to fall back. His feet crushed everything as he fell, leaving deep marks in the void. After a long while, only then did Xingtian stop retreating. Drip! 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 Crimson blood dripped from Xingtian's hand, drop by drop. His thumb and index finger split open. Xuanyuan's sword not only forced Xingtian back, but also split his thumb and index finger. How could this be? This is definitely not Xuanyuan's power. Xingtian was stunned as he stared blankly at his bleeding hand. Someone had interfered in the battle between him and Shenyuan. Otherwise, Shenyuan wouldn't have been able to force him back, let alone injure him. After awakening Pangu's bloodline, Xingtian was confident that he could suppress Shenyuan. In fact, this was indeed the case. Before Feng Zichen made his move, Shenyuan had been suppressed by Xingtian, who had awakened Pangu's bloodline. Give him a stab. Feng Zichen's voice suddenly rang in Xuanyuan's ears. What? At first, Shenyuan was stunned, but soon he realized who was talking to him. Yes. Shenyuan understands. Taking a deep breath, Shenyuan raised his Shenyuan sword and pointed it at Xingtian. Not good. On the other side, the moment Shenyuan raised his sword, Xingtian's heart suddenly hung in the air. He felt a strong sense of crisis in his heart, as if his life was in danger. At this time, he knew that Xuanyuan's next sword would be very strong. If he couldn't block it, it would be enough to bring him the danger of death. Therefore, the best way to resist this sword was to avoid it. However, with Xingtian's pride, how could he allow himself to avoid it? No matter what, he had to block this sword. Because Xingtian had a faint premonition that this sword was the sword that he would use to achieve the Tao. If he couldn't block it, everything would be over. If he blocked it, the primordial chaos Tao fruit was right in front of him. In the future, his path to becoming the primordial chaos Daoyuo Jingxian would be smooth. For this sword, he had to block it at all costs. Huff, taking a few deep breaths, Xingtian clenched the Xingtian axe in his hand and adjusted his state to the peak to deal with the next critical sword. Fellow Xingtian. The war has been going on for thousands of years. It's time to end this ridiculous war. As he spoke, Shenyuan raised the Shenyuan sword high and swung it fiercely at Xingtian. Shua! A sword light flashed and suddenly arrived in front of Xingtian at a speed that surpassed time and space. Before he could react, it directly slashed down. Puff! After a flash of blood, Xingtian's head was separated from his body and thrown high into the air. Beheading with a single sword. Xuanyuan's sword directly cut off Xingtian's head. Too fast, it was really too fast. This sword ignored time and distance. As soon as it was released, it arrived in front of Xing Tian. Without giving him any time to react, it beheaded him. It could be said to be extremely straightforward. At Xing Tian's level of strength, not to mention his head being cut off, even if his entire body was smashed into pieces, it wouldn't endanger his life. Therefore, although Xing Tian's head was cut off, he didn't die and was still alive and well. Head. A loud voice came from Xing Tian's body, trying to summon back the head that had been cut off by Xianyuan to repair his body. But soon, he was disappointed. Because no matter what method Xing Tian used, he couldn't summon back the head that had been cut off. It was as if as the head was separated from the body, the connection between the two was completely cut off. He had no head. And this wasn't the most serious thing. Just as Xing Tian was trying to summon his head, he suddenly realized that there was a strange power quietly growing in his wound. Moreover, this strange power was slowly spreading to all parts of his body with his wound as the starting point. This is... In surprise, Xing Tian suddenly felt that something was wrong. The target of this strange power was the Panga bloodline in his body. That power was as black as ink and extremely domineering. With an aura that hated everything, it pounced straight at the Panga bloodline, wanting to destroy it. Haha. Destroy. Everything related to Panga shouldn't exist in this world. In a trance, the whisper of the demon god sounded in Xing Tian's ears, as if he was describing his unwillingness. Chaos Demon God. That strange power originated from the Chaos Demon God. The disgust that came from the depths of his bloodline immediately made Xing Tian understand the origin of the strange power in his body. The power that belonged to the Chaos Demon God. That's right, the sword that Feng Zichen slashed out with Xianyuan's hand contained the power that belonged to the Chaos Demon God. In this world, the one who hated Panga the most was the Chaos Demon God. Similarly, the one that Panga feared the most was the Chaos Demon God. Because of their hostile relationship, the power of the Chaos Demon God became the power that could stimulate Panga's power the most. Feng Zichen used the power of the Chaos Demon God to kill Xing Tian in order to further stimulate the Panga bloodline in his body so as to accelerate his transformation process. Buzz, as expected, after sensing the power of the Chaos Demon God, the Panga bloodline in Xing Tian's body immediately boiled. Countless mysterious runes gushed out from the depths of his bloodline and swept towards the surging power of the Chaos Demon God. Just like that, the two supreme powers began to battle with Xing Tian's body as the battlefield. Boom! 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 One could see that on Xing Tian's headless body, two rays of brilliance suddenly rose up. One was holy and majestic, and the other was evil and strange. They intertwined with each other. Wherever the strange power passed, Xing Tian's body seemed to have suffered great damage and began to disintegrate and decay. However, as soon as Xing Tian's body showed signs of decay, the holy power immediately rushed over and repaired his body. This process often contained great fortune, which allowed Xing Tian's body to be fully tempered and undergo a drastic transformation. When this transformation reached a certain limit, Xing Tian suddenly roared and erupted with amazing power. Then, a miraculous change happened. Xing Tian completely abandoned his head and used his breasts as his eyes and navel as his mouth. He waved the Xingtian axe in his hand and brazenly charged towards Xianyuan. Die. Crazy. Under the influence of the power of the Chaos Demon God, Xing Tian temporarily lost his mind and became extremely crazy. His heart was filled with the desire to destroy everything around him. Bang! The axe chopped down, the tyrannical power wantonly rushed out, it tore through space and shattered the rules of heaven and earth. Clang! Xianyuan raised his sword and blocked Xing Tian's axe. Although Xing Tian's strength was much stronger than before, because he had lost his mind, he was not as threatening as before. That was because his attack had no skill to speak of. It was very easy to dodge. But even so, Xianyuan could not avoid it. It was because Xing Tian, who was stronger, had a greater destructive power to the surroundings. If Xianyuan dodged Xing Tian's attack, then his attack would hit the depths of the void and bring a great disaster to the common people. How could Xianyuan just stand by and watch the innocent people suffer? Therefore, he could only step forward and try his best to resist Xing Tian. Fortunately, Xianyuan was not fighting alone. Behind him, Feng Zichen was helping him. In order to give Xianyuan the power to resist Xing Tian, Feng Zichen gave him the authority of the innate way of the sword so that he could mobilize the power of the innate way of the sword. After countless years of precipitation, the innate way of the sword was no longer as weak as when it was first born. It had long penetrated into all parts of the untainted land and became like the other innate ways of the sword, able to coexist with the origin of heaven and earth. If the innate way of the sword erupted, its power would definitely be comparable to the realm above the origin. But then, the price would be too great, and it would cause irreversible damage to the innate way of the sword. Therefore, unless it was the most desperate moment, Feng Zichen would never use such means. Now, giving Xianyuan a part of the authority was enough to give him the power to resist Xing Tian. In addition, in order to help Xing Tian suppress the power of the demon god in his body, Xianyuan took out the innate treasure that he had never used in the previous battle, the People Dao Emperor's seal. Previously, because he was not sure about the influence of Pangu's bloodline on the Pangu's finger bone, Xianyuan did not dare to take out this treasure for fear of being counterattacked by the other party. But now, at this moment, Xianyuan was not a fool. He naturally guessed the purpose of Xing Tian's challenge to him. Without hesitation, he directly took out the innate treasure, the People Dao Emperor's seal, and evolved the Pangu's finger bone to help Xing Tian suppress the power of the demon god of chaos in his body. As for being used by Xing Tian, would Xianyuan be angry? To be honest, he was not. Because if it were him, he would not tell the other party directly if he wanted to use others to break through the realm. It was precisely because he did not know that he would kill him, so that the effect of this method would be maximized. If he knew in advance, he would inevitably hold back when he attacked, and he would not be able to achieve his goal. Therefore, he could not tell the other party in advance. Of course, an apology after the event was inevitable. Moreover, there was another reason why Xianyuan was not angry. The joy of the harvest was greater than the anger in his heart. After this battle, his strength would be completely stabilized, and he would officially become the top great magician of the untainted world. He would also lay a firm foundation for the future. The harvest could not be said to be small. So, why would Xianyuan be angry? Boom! The People Dao Emperor's seal was indeed a treasure made by Pangu's fingerbone. Its suppression of the power of the demon god of chaos could be said to be the other party's nemesis. Under its suppression, the power of the demon god of chaos in Xing Tian's body gradually calmed down. Xing Tian also calmed down and stayed motionless in the void, waiting for the end of the change. Well, when the power of the demon god of chaos in Xing Tian's body was completely refined by Pangu's bloodline, he would regain his intelligence and lay a supreme foundation for the Tao. After that, he would only need to undergo endless years of transformation. Xing Tian would naturally be able to attain the Tao and advance to the primordial Daluo Jingxian. After this battle, Xing Tian already had the capital to advance to the primordial chaos. What he lacked now was nothing more than maturity. And this was the only thing that could not be rushed. It would take a long time to polish it. But no matter what, Xing Tian's advancement to the primordial Daluo Jingxian was already a foregone conclusion. The only thing left was to wait. Sigh. How enviable. After Empress Hudu and ancestral witch Dijiang, the witch race is about to welcome the third primordial Daluo Jingxian. How enviable. I wonder when the real primordial Daluo Jingxian will be born in the human race? Looking at Xing Tian, who was undergoing a transformation, Xianyuan said enviously. Did the human race have any primordial chaos experts? Of course, there was more than one. But so what? The so-called primordial Daluo Jingxian of the human race was just a pseudo-primordial Daluo Jingxian that relied on the karmic position of heaven and earth. They couldn't be independent at all. How could they be called carefree and free? What Xianyuan yearned for was the primordial Daluo Jingxian that transcended heaven and earth and obtained great freedom and freedom. Not the 3 emperors and 3 quasi-saints who couldn't disobey the orders of the heavenly Tao. If one day, the heavenly Tao wanted to destroy the human race, then the 3 emperors wouldn't even have the strength to resist. However, the primordial Daluo Jingxian was different. They transcended heaven and earth and drifted outside the long river of time and space. They could resist the heavenly Tao to a certain extent. In fact, they could ignore the orders of the heavenly Tao. At most, after angering the heavenly Tao, they could hide in the chaos outside the realm. In this way, what could the heavenly Tao do to them? No matter how strong the heavenly Tao was, it couldn't reach the chaos outside the realm. It could be said that the one the heavenly Tao disliked the most and even hated the most was the primordial Daluo Jingxian. Because they were beyond the control of the heavenly Tao. And this was what the heavenly Tao couldn't accept the most. Chapter 634. In the primordial world, only the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian was the foundation of a clan leader's prosperity. As long as the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian appeared in the clan, then the clan would be able to exist forever. Even if the calamity descended, the epoch changed, and the great world surged, as long as the primordial world was not completely destroyed, then the clan would never be in danger of being exterminated. Just like the shaman and demon clans, and the 3 Khanate clans, even if they were now in decline, who would dare to destroy them? No one dared to do it. Because, behind them, there was the existence of the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. Even the fallen primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian was still the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. He had a very powerful deterrent force, enough to protect a clan, so that no one dared to exterminate the clan. Therefore, although the shaman and demon clans, and even the 3 Khanate clans had declined, they had not been exterminated. In fact, the so-called decline was only temporary. Once they found an opportunity, they would quickly rise. And this was the confidence of having the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. Therefore, Xianyuan was so eager to have a primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian of the human race. The human race seemed to be prosperous, but there were hidden dangers. The so-called prosperity was just an illusion created by the saints according to the will of the heavenly Tao. This was completely fake and had no foundation. It was like a bubble that would burst at a touch. If one day, the heavenly Tao no longer supported the human race, then, in an instant, the human race would be beaten back to its original state and become a feast for the great magicians. However, if the human race had the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, then everything would be different. This meant that the human race had the qualifications to get rid of the heavenly Tao. Transcending heaven and earth represented infinite possibilities. Right now, we can only place our hopes on Zichen. He is the number 1 genius of the human clan, the number 1 expert of the human clan, and the existence closest to the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. Among the humans, only he is most likely to become the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. If he can't break through, then the human race. Xianyuan thought of Feng Zichen. He believed that Feng Zichen was the hope of the human race. After all, his series of achievements were too dazzling. Even the glory of the saints was overshadowed by him. If such a person couldn't achieve the great path, then Xianyuan really couldn't think of anyone who could achieve the great path and transcend the world. A saint. 2 Primordial Chaos Daluo Jingxian. The sorcerer tribe is such a heaven-defying race. Xianyuan raised his head and looked at Xingtian. He couldn't help but feel jealous. How enviable. One sage was enough to suppress the untainted land, but in addition to the sage, the Wu tribe also had 2 Daluo Jingxian of the primordial chaos. How could they not be jealous? They were simply too strong. Of course, Xianyuan didn't know the situation of the ancestor of sorcerer Xianming. If he knew, he would be even more envious. The 12 temples were not cultivated for nothing. They stood on the untainted land, gathering the true spirit for the fallen ancestor of sorcerer and accumulating the origin. But this didn't mean that the living ancestor of sorcerer couldn't benefit from it. Because the ancestor of sorcerer Xianming hadn't fallen, the origin gathered in the temple that belonged to him would naturally gather in his body to enhance his strength. It could be said that in the future, even if the ancestor of sorcerer Xianming didn't have to do anything, the temple itself could help him cultivate and push him all the way to the level of the primordial Daluo Jingxian. The unique advantage of the 12 ancestors of Sorcerer Xianming was that they existed with the origin of the earth. This was an opportunity that outsiders couldn't envy. With the help of the Xianming Temple, the ancestor of Sorcerer Xianming didn't have to worry about not being able to break through the primordial Daluo Jingxian. This was a secret, and not many people knew about it. Otherwise, if it spread out, it would attract a large number of people's envy. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 3,000 years had passed. In other words, 3,000 years had passed since Xing Tian's transformation. After 3,000 years of transformation, Xing Tian had reached a critical juncture. He was enveloped in a sacred radiance, and countless mysterious runes were constantly being born and destroyed. They seemed to be describing the principles of heaven and earth, mysterious and unfathomable. This was the manifestation of Pangu's bloodline in Xing Tian's body being pushed to the limit. With the support of the human Tao Emperor's seal, the power of Pangu's bloodline had been raised to the greatest extent, overshadowing the power of the Chaos Demon God in one fell swoop. Now that it had been completely suppressed, it was waiting to slowly erase it. Under the suppression of Pangu's bloodline, the power of the Chaos Demon God no longer had the ability to stir up trouble. Without the interference of the power of the Chaos Demon God, the connection between Xing Tian's body and head began to gradually recover. Waves of mysterious power were emitted from Xing Tian's neck, trying to recall the severed head. Buzz buzz buzz, in the distance, Xing Tian's head, which had fallen into silence since it was severed by Xuanyuan's sword, finally reacted under the call of Xing Tian's body. It trembled gently. Head, 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 after sensing the aura of the giant head, Xing Tian called out almost instinctively. Buzz buzz buzz, under the call of Xing Tian's body, Xing Tian's head trembled even more violently. It slowly floated up from the air and flew shakily towards Xing Tian's body, wanting to reunite with him. Chaos as one, complete great Tao. When Xing Tian's head reunited with his body, he would obtain some kind of completion, and his consciousness would wake up. At that time, Xuanyuan would have nothing to do, and he could leave. Next, it would be Xing Tian's own business. He would return to Pangu's palace and enter the deepest level of enlightenment to complete the final transformation and break through to become Chaos Daluo Jingxian. In this battle, Xuanyuan had been tempered. Xing Tian had seen the path ahead and obtained the opportunity to attain the Tao. Everything was so perfect, completely in line with Feng Zichen and Huda's plan. As long as Xing Tian's head returned to its original position, this matter would be perfectly concluded. But there were still flaws in the way of the heavens, let alone in this world. In the world, there was nothing perfect at all. Therefore, an accident happened. Just as Xing Tian's head was about to fly back to his body, an accident happened. An inexplicable power was born from the void. It was powerful and terrifying as it attacked Xing Tian's head. Caught off guard, Xing Tian's head, which was suspended in mid-air, was directly hit. With a bang, a terrifying power erupted. Xing Tian's head was smashed into powder by this power on the spot, turning into a rain of blood that fell from the sky. But this was not the end. After shattering Xing Tian's head, the terrifying power did not dissipate. Instead, it spread out in the void and swept towards Xing Tian's head, turning into a rain of blood that filled the sky. From the looks of it, it wanted to completely obliterate it to cut off the possibility of Xing Tian's head reforming. Steady, accurate, and ruthless. It had to be said that the person who made the move had really seized a good opportunity. Seeing that the great merit was about to be achieved, Feng Zichen and the others could not help but let down their guard. That person had made a move at this time. How could he not succeed in one fell swoop? Although shattering and obliterating Xing Tian's head could not stop Xing Tian from advancing to primordial Daluo Jingxian, it could delay the time for his breakthrough. Primordial chaos was about perfection. If the head was shattered and the body was incomplete, wouldn't it lose its perfection? Indeed, with Xing Tian's ability, after removing the power of the Chaos Demon God, he could regenerate a new head at any time. However, how could a new head be compared to the head that had been polished for countless years? It would take a long time to get used to it before it could achieve harmony with the original body. And during this period of time, wouldn't it be delayed? The time for him to attain the Tao would naturally be delayed for a period of time. And the longer it took, the more variables there would be. Who knew what would happen to Xing Tian during that period of time? Therefore, the person who made the move in the dark could be said to be vicious. Even if I can't stop you, I will disgust you to death. In the face of the sudden change, before Xianyuan could react, two explosive voices suddenly sounded in the sky and the earth at almost the same time. Thief, how dare you? Before the two voices fell, boundless star power hung down from the starry sky above the sky, turning into countless sharp swords that fell into the depths of the void like a rainstorm. At the same time, in the underworld below the ground, the power of reincarnation surged out, emitting a wave that could destroy everything, sweeping towards the power that wanted to destroy Xing Tian's head. These two people were naturally Feng Zichen and Hudu. When they saw that someone had plotted against Xing Tian, the anger in their hearts could be imagined. Especially, they were interrupted at the happiest moment. That feeling of being neither up nor down was like a fishbone stuck in their throats, causing the anger in their hearts to be especially blazing, almost increasing exponentially. Therefore, without hesitation, they attacked as fast as they could. One attacked from the sky. One attacked from the ground. One attacked the depths of the void to block the attacker's retreat. One of them charged to Xing Tian's side to protect his head. Rumble. Reincarnation was impermanent, cyclical, and indeterminate. Its creation was endless, and its power was endless. Almost as soon as it appeared, it destroyed the inexplicable power that was attacking Xing Tian's head. However, although Hudu attacked quickly, she was still one step slower than the attacker. And it was this one-step difference that caused a portion of the blood rain that Xing Tian's head had turned into to be destroyed. About 3 to 4 layers. In this way, although Xing Tian's head was saved, it was inevitable that Xing Tian's head would be greatly damaged and would need a period of time to recuperate. Logically speaking, after suffering such a heavy injury, Xing Tian's breakthrough would inevitably be delayed. However, the power of reincarnation was indeed one of the most powerful forces in the primordial world. Its power was strange and far beyond imagination. Amnesty. Huda's clear and cold voice suddenly resounded through space. As soon as she finished speaking, she saw the surging power of reincarnation. It suddenly turned. In an instant, time and space were distorted. The part of Xing Tian's head that had been destroyed earlier actually reappeared in the void. This was the greatness of the power of reincarnation. It distorted time and space, messing up the past, present, and future. Once it exerted its strength, it forcefully snatched back the part of Xing Tian's head that had been completely destroyed from the past. Huda's side was shocking, and Feng Zichen's side was not bad. A rain of swords fell from the sky, and in an instant, the void was stabbed into pieces, completely destroyed, and turned into a state of nothingness. It was also at this moment that a strange shadow escaped from the void in a sorry state. And the moment this strange shadow appeared from the void, Feng Zichen's eyes had already locked onto it on the Emperor Star. One could see that at this moment, Feng Zichen's eyes had completely turned purple gold. This was the state of the heavenly Tao Divine Eye when it was fully opened. He was using this method to spy on the true identity of the strange shadow, so that he could find it and kill it completely to vent the anger in his heart and intimidate some people with ulterior motives. External incarnation? That's right. How can I let myself do such a dirty thing? However, it doesn't matter. When I capture your external incarnation, I'm not afraid that I won't know your true origin. On the Emperor Star, Feng Zichen frowned, but he could see the origin of the strange shadow. It was the external incarnation of a powerful existence. Thinking about it, this was normal. Once this kind of thing was done, it was obvious that he would offend the Hutu to death. In this way, if his true identity was exposed, he would definitely be hunted down by the Hutu to death. No one would be able to find a reason to plead for mercy. Therefore, the external incarnation became the best cover. Why did he have to refine an external incarnation? Wasn't it used to take the blame for the original body at the critical moment? Just like the temporary workers in the later generations, if there was a problem, it would be the external incarnation, temporary worker, that did it. It had nothing to do with the original body, official employee. Haha. Your Majesty Emperor Ziwei, your strength is indeed strong enough, not much inferior to a saint. It's easy to defeat the poor Wei. But it's not that easy to capture the poor Wei. After hearing Feng Zichen's words, the strange shadow laughed and replied fearlessly. Oh. Then let's give it a try. Let me witness what you are capable of. In this regard, Feng Zichen only smiled faintly. He directly reached out his hand and pressed it toward him from afar, wanting to suppress him in one fell swoop. At the same time, in order to prevent the shadow from self-destructing, Feng Zichen also secretly activated the Hongmeng purple clock. When it showed signs of self-destruction or self-destruction, he would activate the Hongmeng Daozhong and freeze time and space. Although he was prepared in this way, in Feng Zichen's heart, he did not think that the other party would self-destruct. At most, he would directly kill himself when he saw that things were not going well. As for why Feng Zichen thought so, there was a reason. The wizard clan had dominated the primordial world for many years and had offended more than one or two powerful beings. Instead, there were dozens or hundreds of them. When the wizard clan was strong, these powerful beings could not do anything to them. But now, the wizard clan had declined. Under such circumstances, how could they allow the wizard clan to have another primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian and rise again? Therefore, they would stop Xing Tian from achieving the Dao so that they could cut off the hope of the wizard clan rising. Moreover, these great divine ability masters who had a grudge against the Magi were not the only ones who could not bear to see the Magi rise. Chapter 635. In the dark. Who knew how many conspirators were looking forward to the complete decline of the Magi? It was still the same sentence. There was only so much luck in the primordial world. And the rise of every powerful force would reduce the luck in the hands of those big shots. In this way, who would see the rise of a new great force? This was a major event that concerned their own interests. Unless their relationship was particularly good, it was already good enough for them not to step on the rise of a new force and just watch from the sidelines. It was normal for them to secretly interfere with the rise of a new force. It was precisely because of this that Feng Zichen was sure that the other party would not self-destruct. Everyone was a great magician of the primordial world and had the same interests as the primordial world. How could they self-destruct and destroy the primordial world? Therefore, even if they were forced into a desperate situation, they would only commit suicide. They would not be like the experts of the demonic path, who would directly self-destruct and perish together. Just as Feng Zichen attacked the strange shadow, on the other side, the majestic power of reincarnation also quietly arrived. It silently lurked at the side to completely block the other party's retreat and ensure that he was suppressed. The invincible in the sky and the invincible in the ground attacked at the same time, jointly targeting the strange shadow in the middle. With such power, even an ordinary primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian would not be able to escape. The power of the strange shadow was only at the half-step primordial chaos realm. It was completely insufficient to fight against it. However, even so, the strange shadow still did not change its expression when facing the attacks of Feng Zichen and Hudu, as if it did not take the two of them seriously at all. Fellow Taoists. What are you waiting for? If the poor Wei is suppressed by the two of them, you won't have a chance to attack. Just as Feng Zichen thought that the other party had some powerful trump card and was about to reveal it, he saw the strange shadow suddenly shout into the void. Feng Zichen was speechless. He thought that he had some trump card? In the end. That was it? That was it. While he was speechless, Feng Zichen's hand movements were not slow. In fact, he even sped up a little. He pressed toward the strange shadow from afar, wanting to completely suppress him. However, just as Feng Zichen's palm was about to press down, a few violent fluctuations suddenly appeared in the void. They carried a terrifying aura and surged toward his palm. Humph. You're an ant trying to shake a tree. You're overestimating yourself. Feng Zichen sneered in his heart when he sensed the fluctuations. He didn't care about them at all and continued to press toward the strange shadow, allowing the attacks to hit him. How could a mere half-step primordial chaos cultivator injure his palm, which was formed by the power of the stars? Wouldn't that be underestimating the boundless starry sky? The fluctuation hit Feng Zichen's palm, and a terrifying power burst out, creating ripples on the surface of the palm. But that was all there was to it. Apart from the ripples, the palm condensed from the starlight of the universe did not suffer any damage. It did not even pause. It still pressed down toward the strange shadow with an irresistible momentum. Feng Zichen Feng's palm pressed down. It covered the sky and the sun, completely enveloping and suppressing the strange shadow. Seal. As his words fell, endless starlight radiated from his palm. It turned into dazzling divine chains of order. They rushed toward the suppressed strange shadow and firmly wrapped around his body. Fellow cultivator, let me take a look. Who exactly are you? After locking the strange shadow, Feng Zichen pulled up the divine chains. He was about to pull him into the boundless starry sky so that he could take a look at his true face. However, it seemed that he was deliberately making things difficult for Feng Zichen. At every critical moment, accidents happened. Haha. Emperor Ziwei, poor Wei still has important matters to attend to. I won't be going to the Ziwei Heavenly Palace to disturb you. Poor Wei is going. The strange shadow that was locked up by the divine chains of order laughed and took out a purple jade talisman. Not good. After sensing the aura emitted by the purple jade talisman, Feng Zichen immediately knew that something was wrong and was about to take action to remedy the situation. But unfortunately, everything was over. Chi. Countless mysterious runes surged out from the purple jade talisman. In the blink of an eye, they enveloped the strange shadow. After that, a purple light flashed, and the figure of the strange shadow disappeared. Even though Feng Zichen released his divine consciousness in time and searched the entire primitive world, he did not find the slightest trace of his aura. It was as if this person had evaporated into thin air. Good. Very good. Very good. The treasure bestowed by the Tao ancestor is indeed extraordinary. On the Ziwei star, Feng Zichen's face completely darkened. That's right, the purple jade talisman in the strange shadow's hand was one of the treasures that Tao ancestor Heng Jun had refined back then. The aura he emitted was definitely the purest heavenly Heng Jun aura. Feng Zichen would never mistake it. It was with this treasure that the other party was able to escape from his hands. Although Tao ancestor Heng Jun had only just entered the primordial chaos Tao realm when he refined those treasures, he hadn't even stepped into the primordial chaos Tao realm yet. However, after Tao ancestor Heng Jun merged with the Tao, everything related to him became an item of the heavenly Tao. As a result, his power was greatly increased and he became extraordinary. It was precisely because of this reason that the treasures refined by Tao ancestor Heng Jun in the past had become one of the best special treasures in the primordial world. They, who possessed the power of the way of the heavens, had the power to break the rules. They could turn the rotten into the miraculous, and the impossible into the possible. Their power was far beyond imagination. With the help of the purple jade talisman, the strange shadow easily escaped from Feng Zichen's hands. F***CK. The treasures left behind by the Tao ancestor are really troublesome. It seems that after this matter, I have to find an opportunity to go to the Purple Cloud Palace to meet the Tao ancestor and ask him for a way to restrain those treasures. Otherwise, I will inevitably suffer a huge loss when facing these treasures left behind by the Tao ancestor in the future. It's best if I can persuade the Tao ancestor to take back all these treasures. Treasures that break the rules are the most unstable factor in the primordial world. They should not exist in the world. After dispersing the starlight, Feng Zichen cursed hatefully. Of course, he also knew that it was impossible for Tao ancestor Heng Jun to take back those treasures. The Tao ancestor had already given them. How could he take them back? Tao ancestor Heng Jun could not afford to lose face. However, after this matter, no matter what, Feng Zichen of the Purple Cloud Palace had to make a trip there. Including the time with Daoist Mu Xian, he had already suffered twice from the Dao ancestors' treasures. As the saying goes, once and twice, but not thrice. He did not want this to happen a third time. Therefore, it was inevitable that he would go to Dao ancestor Hong Jun to ask for a way to restrain it. He's gone. Then, how are you going to escape? On the Emperor Star, Feng Zichen retracted his thoughts and turned to look at another void. Over there were a few people who had helped the strange shadow to escape from its predicament. Not only did their actions fail to save the strange shadow, but they also exposed themselves. Rumble, the power of reincarnation kept spinning in the void. It was opposing and unified, evolving into all kinds of mysterious powers. It locked down the space-time here and trapped those people in place, unable to leave. The Lady of Earth had made a move. After this happened, it was obvious that the Lady of Earth was even angrier than Feng Zichen. It was also because of this that the Lady of Earth and Xing Tian were truly on their side. As for Feng Zichen, he could only be considered half of their side. In that case, compared to Feng Zichen, the Lady of Earth was naturally more nervous about Xing Tian. In the starry sky, star power condensed again, turning into a huge imperial seal that pressed down on the few people trapped by the Lady of Earth. This time, I'd like to see how you're going to escape. This time, Feng Zichen did not believe that these people also had the Dao ancestors' treasures. They were not cabbages that could be seen everywhere. However, reality slapped him hard in the face. It was also because Feng Zichen had forgotten that the so-called Dao ancestors' treasures were in the hands of the great magicians. Back then, the existences who had obtained the Dao ancestors' treasures from the treasure-snatching rock should have become the top great magicians of the primordial world. On the other side, Feng Zichen had just said that he would not suffer a third loss from the Dao ancestors' treasures. But shortly after, the third loss came right at his face. Under his incredulous gaze, one of the people trapped by the Lady of Earth suddenly took out a small purple Dao bell. Clang, that person gently shook the Dao bell, and endless runes appeared. Like a tide, they spread quickly and covered the entire void in the blink of an eye. Boom! The starlight seal suddenly pressed down and pierced through the mysterious rune. After receiving such a heavy blow, the rune was destroyed. However, there was no trace of those people on the spot. They had long run away. Without a doubt, the small purple Dao bell was also one of the Dao ancestors' treasures. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to lead everyone away safely under the joint attack of Feng Zichen and the Lady of Earth. The power of the Dao ancestors' treasures was indeed unbelievable. Fortunately, although the Dao ancestors' treasures were strong, they were consumables and could not be used repeatedly. At most, they could be used 2 or 3 times, 4 or 5 times. In any case, they could not be used more than 9 times. After that, they would shatter. It was precisely because of this restriction that the primordial world would not be in chaos. Otherwise, if the Dao ancestors' treasures were allowed to wreak havoc, who knew what the primordial world would become? Damn the Dao ancestors' treasures. At this moment, Feng Zichen felt that his face had been slapped so hard that it was almost swollen. Of course, he was not the only one with a black face. The Lady of Earth's expression was not much better. This time, the two of them were embarrassed. Even after joining forces, they still let him escape. It was really embarrassing. This humiliation also made the Lady of Earth secretly make up her mind. After this matter, she had to focus on studying the Tao and the 6 paths of reincarnation disc so that she could find a way to deal with the Tao ancestors' treasures. The Tao and the heavenly Tao had the same status. The 6 paths of reincarnation disc was a chaos treasure that transcended the world and was not under the jurisdiction of the heavenly Tao. Therefore, the power of these two had the ability to resist the Tao ancestors' treasures. However, how to operate it depended on the Lady of Earth's comprehension and methods. However, although they did not catch the person who ambushed them and the person who rescued them later, the two of them did not gain nothing. At the very least, they were certain that the person who attacked was definitely a great divine ability of the primordial world. Otherwise, they would definitely not have been able to take out the Tao ancestors' treasures. If the Chaos Fiend Celestial used the Tao Ancestors' treasures, the Heavenly Tao would probably immediately know his identity and send down the heavenly punishment to completely destroy him. From the matter of the great divine ability interfering with Xing Tian's attainment of the Tao, it could be seen that many great divine abilities of the primordial world were full of hostility towards the Magi and did not want to see them rise again. In the future, there would probably be a lot of trouble. However, this had nothing to do with Feng Zichen. He could be said to have done his best for the Magi. He had revived the Magi and nurtured experts. He was completely worthy of the help the Magi had given the human clan back then. Therefore, after this matter, he would focus on developing the human clan. Although he would not completely ignore the Magi, he would obviously not be as concerned as he was now. Haha. The descendants of Pangu also want to break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm in peace. It's simply a dream. It's really exciting to be able to personally kill the genius of Pangu's lineage. The pain that Pangu brought to us, let his descendants bear it on his behalf. Just as Feng Zichen and Hudu were pondering, the scene changed again. 3 chaos demon gods walked out of the void carelessly and attacked Xing Tian, who was transforming. Their attitude could be said to be arrogant. They did not take Feng Zichen and Hudu, who were paying attention to this place, seriously at all. What did it mean to be arrogant? That was it. The arrogant attitude of the 3 chaos demon gods really stunned Feng Zichen. He did not know whether they were really stupid or not. It was because of this time that he was stunned that he did not immediately stop the 3 of them. Kill. After seeing the 3 chaos demon gods coming, Xian Yuan, who was guarding beside Xing Tian, held the Xian Yuan sword in his hand and directly attacked one of the chaos demon gods with the principle of, whoever strikes first gains the advantage and whoever strikes later suffers the disaster. As for the strength of the 3 chaos demon gods, they had naturally stepped into the realm of the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. However, these 3 chaos demon gods were new faces. He had never seen them before. Moreover, judging from their aura, they were obviously unstable. Obviously, they had just been promoted to the realm of the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. But this was not important. Crossing that threshold represented the peak of the untainted land. The strength of one person alone was more than the combined strength of the previous few people. At this moment, there were 3 of them, which showed how much importance the chaos demon gods attached to Xing Tian. Boom! Xing Tian attacked and fought with one of the chaos demon gods. Fortunately, Feng Zichen had opened up part of the authority of the Khanate sword principle to him. Otherwise, Xian Yuan would not have been able to defeat this chaos demon god. On the other side, seeing that Xian Yuan had stopped one of the chaos demon gods, Huda did not dare to show weakness. She used the power of reincarnation to stop another chaos demon god. Hey! I said, on Ziwei Star. Feng Zichen took a step forward and said to the last person in a low voice. Chapter 636. Killing intent, uncontrollable killing intent, rose in Feng Zichen's body. Being slapped in the face consecutively had long made him extraordinarily angry. After that, the contempt of the 3 chaos demon gods infuriated him to the extreme. Therefore, Feng Zichen had the intention to kill. He wanted to use blood to extinguish the anger in his heart. You guys, did you forget something? The low voice resounded clearly in the ears of the chaos demon god, stopping him from moving forward. Under the pretentious calm tone, there was uncontrollable anger. From this, one could see how angry the owner of the voice was. Oh. You Junior, are you stopping me? Are you hallucinating because you defeated a few chaos demon gods earlier? So much so that you think that the chaos demon gods are nothing more than this? It's ridiculous. Even innate god fiends have differences in strength, let alone chaos demon gods. The chaos demon god turned around and put his hands behind his back. As if he was preaching, he said to Feng Zichen. Unlike the 9 chaos demon gods that appeared first, although the 3 of them were not the top chaos demon gods, they were still above average and extremely powerful. Every one of them had the cultivation of the 6th firmament of primordial chaos. Therefore, they had the right to be arrogant. They knew Feng Zichen's battle record, but they still didn't take him seriously. Silence. There was another moment of silence. The other party was so arrogant that Feng Zichen was speechless. Die. Tired, Feng Zichen didn't say much. He directly pressed down with his palm, trying to kill him. Whether the other party was really confident or just bluffing, it didn't matter. What he wanted was just that the other party was dead, that was all. As Feng Zichen raised his hand, countless starlight gathered and condensed into a dazzling handprint in the starry sky. It blotted out the sky and covered the sun as it rushed toward the chaos demon celestial. Rumble. With the seal, everything changed. An invisible aura spread out, and the world froze. The great Tao stopped rotating, and the river of time stopped moving. Countless living beings lost their consciousness. At that time, the primordial world could still remain awake. Only those great beings who had stood at the end of the river of time could do so. But at this moment, they were not in the right state. These great mediums all stared blankly at the huge handprint descending from the sky, their bodies trembling slightly. They were afraid. They were terrified of the huge handprint that was descending from the sky. This was because they felt a long-lost sense of crisis from the aura emitted by the handprint. It was as if... No, it didn't seem like it. Even if it was true, under that palm, they would really die, completely fall. Their physical bodies would vanish, and their innate indestructible true spirits would completely disperse. Even the great Tao that they had painstakingly cultivated would fall into silence. The mark of the origin of the great Tao would also sink and be difficult to appear again. This meant that once they were killed by that handprint, they would become like the first-generation innate god-fiends that had fallen in the ancient times. Although they would not completely fall, they would never be able to return from the silence. And if they could never return, what was the difference between them and complete death? It could be said that this was the first time that the great mediums had felt such a strong life-and-death crisis since they had proven their Tao. That handprint could threaten the foundation of their existence. It was really terrifying. Fortunately, that magical power was not aimed at them. Otherwise, they really did not know how to resist such an attack. In the face of Feng Zichen's palm, the great mediums who were still watching the battle were terrified, not to mention the chaos demon god who was in the center of Feng Zichen's attack. The moment the huge handprint fell, the chaos demon god knew that something was wrong. He could no longer maintain his previous arrogance, and the smile on his face was replaced by a look of horror. Almost subconsciously, he wanted to retreat so that he could avoid this divine ability. But unfortunately, he could not move. He was fixed in place by the aura of the huge handprint, and could only resist the palm that fell from the sky. Rumble. When the handprint fell, it could be seen that there was a five-colored brilliance blooming. Above the handprint, 5 vague shadows of emperors were faintly formed. That was the Supreme Great 5 Emperor's handprint. Of course, although the power of the 5 Emperor's handprint was strong, it was too exaggerated to say that it could frighten the great mediums in the untainted land and the chaos demon god in the 6th heaven of Hunyuan. Therefore, the 5 Emperor's handprint that Feng Zichen used was completely different from the one he had used before. The 5 shadows of emperors behind the handprint were not the 5 elements sacred beasts, 5 elements ancestral sorcerer, or 5 elements demonic god. They were the incarnations of the celestial immortals Tao, the earth immortals Tao, the human immortals Tao, the immortal immortals Tao, and the ghost immortals Tao. These 5 immortal Taos represented all the immortal Taos in the untainted land. Feng Zichen played the 5 roles. He used Great Emperor Ziwei to derive the Tao of sky immortals, Xianqing to derive the Tao of earth immortals, Luiz to derive the Tao of human immortals, Gaochen to derive the Tao of divine immortals, and Fengdu to derive the Tao of ghost immortals. The 5 incarnations each carried the 5 immortal Taos and combined the providence of the 5 immortal Taos into one, turning into a supreme handprint that blasted toward the chaos demon god. It could be said that Feng Zichen's handprint was called the 5 Emperors' handprint, but it was actually the providence of the entire immortal Tao. What was the immortal Tao? It was the orthodox and mainstream of the untainted land. It was not an exaggeration to say that its providence and power were far beyond imagination. When the palm pressed down, the providence of the entire immortal Tao and the orthodox of the untainted land pressed down. Who could resist such power? Not to mention the chaos demon god, even the demon ancestor Rahu himself would not be able to resist it. This divine power was one of the strongest trump cards that Feng Zichen had deduced at all costs after the battle with the demon ancestor Rahu. He was worried that the demon ancestor Rahu would make a comeback. Originally, Feng Zichen had prepared to use this divine power to deal with the demon ancestor Rahu. However, since the chaos demon god had come to seek death, Feng Zichen could satisfy him. Therefore, he used a fatal blow the moment he attacked. While establishing his dignity, he also tested the power of this divine power to see if it could really defeat the demon ancestor Rahu. As the 5 emperors' handprint fell, the 5 shadows of emperors behind it became clearer and clearer. An aura that encompassed the 5 elements, encompassed all things, and contained life and death. It was faintly emitted from his body. Boom! The handprint was resplendent and enveloped the entire world, mercilessly pressing down on the chaos demon god who was fixed in place. Silently, the universe was shattered and the great Tao was destroyed. Endless destructive aura surged out. Under the power of the entire immortal Tao, no matter how the chaos demon god struggled, it was futile. His body began to disintegrate and shatter, turning into a rain of blood that filled the sky. Then, he was obliterated one by one. His chaotic true spirit also dissipated silently, turning into a dazzling Tao light that blended into the world to strengthen the origin of the world. At the same time, in the endless world, the origin of the immortal Tao manifested, turning into endless rules that were branded in the endless void and covered the entire untainted world. They were tightly entangled with the mark of the chaos demon god that was engraved in the world to prevent him from regathering his true spirit and reviving the fallen chaos demon god. At this point, although the reincarnation of the chaos demon god had not completely fallen, he would never be able to return. At the same time, this also meant that the chaos demon god's original body in the Great Thousand World had lost half of his chaotic true spirit forever. Unless the untainted world was completely destroyed, he would never be able to retrieve this part of his chaotic true spirit from the suppression of the immortal Tao brand. Damn it. Pangaziwei clan. I'll remember you. When I recover my strength, I'll definitely make you pay for what you've done today. The moment the chaos demon god died, a supreme being in a great thousand world outside the endless spacetime couldn't help but roar loudly. Without a doubt, he was the chaos demon god's original body. The loss of half of his true spirit was enough to greatly damage his vitality. Moreover, this was an irreversible injury. Before he retrieved the suppressed half of his chaotic true spirit, this injury would continue to affect him. In this way, how could the chaos demon god not hate him? It was only because he couldn't go to the untainted world now. Otherwise, he would definitely risk his life to fight Feng Zichen. A threat? Interesting. I just don't know if you'll still be qualified to fight me after the connection between the Great Thousand World and the untainted world is connected. At this moment, Feng Zichen's strength had reached an incredible level with the support of the immortal Tao luck. Therefore, if someone was talking about him, he would naturally sense it. Of course, the chaos demon god was separated from him by endless spacetime after all. Even if he could sense it, he couldn't completely know what the chaos demon god was thinking. All he could sense was the chaos demon god's hostility. However, this was enough for Feng Zichen to guess what the chaos demon god wanted to express. He was just making things difficult for him. However, Feng Zichen wouldn't take the chaos demon god's threat to heart. He was now in the growth period and was improving all the time. Perhaps when the chaos demon god really appeared in front of him, his strength would have already surpassed the chaos demon god. This was not impossible. Do you want to continue, fellow Taoists? Feng Zichen said to the chaos demon god who was fighting with Hudu and Shenyuan without the slightest complacency. He just calmly put his hands behind his back and said to the chaos demon god who was fighting with Hutu and Shenyuan. However, although he was very calm, the two chaos demon gods didn't think so. After all, he had just killed the chaos demon god with one strike. Who dared to ignore his words? At this moment, Feng Zichen didn't need to make any extra movements. The remaining aura of the strike just now was enough to intimidate all the powerful divines. At least, before completely figuring out the reason for that strike, no one dared to ignore Feng Zichen. Sure enough, as soon as Feng Zichen finished speaking, the two Chaos Demon gods who were fighting with Hutu and Xianyuan immediately withdrew and confronted Feng Zichen across the void. What an amazing strike! With you in the untainted land, the future will be colorful. We won't be lonely. After a long silence, one of the Chaos Demon gods suddenly spoke. So, I've decided to give you face and leave for the time being. After saying that, the two Chaos Demon gods gradually disappeared without waiting for Feng Zichen's response. Feng Zichen didn't stop them. He had already killed a Chaos Demon god. If he were to make them stay, he would be forcing them to fight to the death. Moreover, the other Chaos Demon gods wouldn't tolerate such a situation. The current untainted land couldn't withstand a full-scale war between the powerful divines and the Chaos Demon gods. Therefore, Feng Zichen allowed them to leave. Left and right. He wasn't the one who was at a disadvantage. Pangaziwe clan, I look forward to meeting you next time. I hope you can bring more surprises to us Chaos Demon gods. After the two Chaos Demon gods had completely disappeared, a faintly discernible voice suddenly came from the void, indicating that this matter was not over yet. Boring trick. Feng Zichen waved his hand to disperse the voice. He didn't take it to heart. It seemed that every villain would do such a thing to save face. Fellow Taoists, please give Ziwei some face and disperse. After forcing the Chaos Demon gods to retreat, Feng Zichen walked straight down the Ziwei star and came to the side of Xing Tian in the depths of the void. He said to the powerful divines who were watching this place. Your Majesty, you must be joking. Poor Wei and the others will leave now. After a few embarrassed laughs, the powerful divines withdrew their divine thoughts. No matter what purpose they had for watching the battle, after seeing Feng Zichen's strength, they would withdraw their thoughts to avoid causing misunderstandings. Whoosh! The void shattered silently. An aura unique to the underworld emerged, and the power of reincarnation surged out. It turned into a huge phantom of a wheel, protecting a peerless woman as she walked over. But, Huda came in person. First, the powerful divines attacked, then the Chaos Demon gods attacked. Finally, Huda was enraged. She didn't hesitate to come out of the underworld to protect Xing Tian. Just like that, Feng Zichen and Huda stood on the left and right of Xing Tian to protect him. After witnessing this scene, no one would dare to plot against Xing Tian. In the blink of an eye, thousands of years had passed. Xing Tian's aura gradually calmed down. This also meant that Feng Zichen's protection mission was finally over. During this period of time, thank you so much, fellow Taoist. Fellow Taoist, the wizard tribe will never forget your help today. Huda raised her hand and took Xing Tian away. She thanked Feng Zichen seriously. You're welcome, fellow Taoist. As Panga's descendants, we should help each other. Why do you and I have to be so polite? Feng Zichen waved his hand and said with a smile. That was true. Feng Zichen's real name was the Panga Zichen clan, and Great Emperor Ziwei's real name was the Panga Ziwei clan. Like the 12 ancestral sorcerers of the Three Pure Ones, they were the most authentic descendants of the Pangu. Chapter 637. Therefore, in a sense, Feng Zichen and the 12 ancestral magi of the Three Pure Ones could be considered family. It was natural for him to be close to the magi. As for why he was not close to the Three Pure Ones, it was naturally because the relationship between the Three Pure Ones and the Pangu had been distant many years ago. This was the result of the Three Pure Ones' long-term efforts. They had been using some method to weaken their relationship with the Pangu. It could be said that apart from the identity of the Pangu, the Three Pure Ones had nothing to do with the Pangu. How could Feng Zichen, who was surrounded by the Pangu, be close to the Three Pure Ones? On the other hand, the Magi had a good relationship with Feng Zichen because they were also surrounded by the Pangu. They were natural allies. Yes. All of this was very reasonable. These words were completely for outsiders to hear. Outsiders did not know the relationship between Feng Zichen and Great Emperor Ziwei, so they naturally did not understand why he helped the Magi. However, as soon as this sentence was said, those great mystical abilities would automatically fill in a reasonable explanation. Fellow Daoist Ziwei, since this matter is over, the poor Wei will leave with Xing Tian first. After his transformation is completed, the poor Wei will bring him to visit personally to thank you for your help today. After bowing to Feng Zichen, the Lady of Earth left with Xing Tian. After all, this place was not a good place for seclusion. It was also not safe. If they continued to stay, it was hard to guarantee that no one would choose to take the risk. Therefore, the Lady of Earth decided to bring Xing Tian back to the Pangu Hall first. Only that place was the most suitable place for Xing Tian to transform. As a temple formed by the Pangu skull, the Pangu Hall had incredible abilities. It could be said to be the safest place in the primordial world. Even the heavenly Tao could not interfere there. To be precise, the heavenly Tao could not see the Pangu Hall at all. Even if Hall Pangu was right under the eyes of the heavenly Tao would not be able to discover it. This was Pangu's strength. Even though countless years had passed, the people of the primordial world still found it difficult to understand the means that he had left behind. Buzz buzz buzz, as ripples appeared in the void, Hudu and Xing Tian's figures slowly disappeared. They had already made their way to the Pangu Palace through the connection between them. After Huda left, Feng Zichen glanced around. His figure flickered, and he also disappeared. He had returned to the Emperor's Star. The battle between the human Emperor Xian Yuan and the great sorcerer Xing Tian broke out suddenly and ended very hastily. Originally, everyone thought that one of them would definitely die. At the very least, it should also be a lose-lose situation, and the relationship between the two clans would be broken because of this. However, the result was extremely unexpected. Not only did the two sides of the battle not die because of this, but they also obtained a huge opportunity and became even more powerful. For example, Xing Tian, who was originally half a step into the realm of primordial chaos, had surpassed his limit and broken his own shackles after this battle. From then on, he was one step closer and saw the hope of becoming the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. As for Xian Yuan, he had relied on this battle to completely stabilize his realm and officially became one of the top great masters of the primordial world. He had become even more difficult to deal with. Moreover, the most important thing was that after this battle, not only were the two of them not injured, but they had also gained something and their strength had greatly improved. This also made it so that the scene of the relationship between the two clans breaking up that everyone had expected did not happen. The truth was exactly the opposite of everyone's expectations. It could be foreseen that after this battle, the relationship between the two clans would definitely become closer. The Sorcerer clan and the Human clan were definitely the most reliable allies. Such an unexpected scene completely shattered the confidence of the experts of the myriad clans. Through this battle, the experts of the myriad clans fully witnessed Xian Yuan's strength. They were terrified and quickly extinguished the thought of fighting with him. Too strong, he was really too strong. Judging from the strength that Xian Yuan had displayed, even if the myriad clans used all their strength, they might not be his match. Since that was the case, it was not a wise choice to fight with him. Wasn't it just leaving the primordial world and going to the heaven realm? So be it. It wasn't like they would lose a piece of meat. Moreover, even if they lost a piece of meat, it was still better than leaving their lives in the primordial world. Looking at Xian Yuan's determination, if they chose to stay in the primordial world, they were afraid that he would really kill them. In that case, in order to save their lives, it was better to leave. Obviously, the experts of the myriad clans were completely frightened by the strength that Xian Yuan had displayed. They were determined not to disobey Xian Yuan's orders and leave the primordial world with him for the heaven realm. It was with this thought that when Xian Yuan gathered the experts of the myriad clans, they were very cooperative. Yes, that's right, Xian Yuan was about to complete his merit. Before the battle with Xing Tian, Xian Yuan had already been in power for 990,000 years. He was still 10,000 years away from completing his merit. And when he finished the battle with Xing Tian, nearly 5,000 years had passed unknowingly. In other words, during Xian Yuan's reign, there were still 5,000 years left. And what about 5,000 years? For an existence like Xian Yuan, it was really a blink of an eye. So soon. It was time for Xian Yuan to abdicate. On this day, in the millionth year of the human emperor's calendar, the experts of the myriad clans gathered in the ancestral land of the human race, displaying the grand occasion of the primordial world. Xiaohao, my son. Today, Father will hand over the human race to you. You, don't let Father and all the sages of the human race down. We are all watching you from above. In the Tai Temple, under the witness of the Virgin Yuhua, the Holy Emperor Zichen, the Ancestor Emperor Suiren, and even the statues of the sages of the human race, Xian Yuan personally handed the innate treasure, the human emperor's seal, which represented the supreme power of the human race, to the first great emperor of the human race, Xiaohao. Yes. Xiaohao will not disappoint Father. It has been entrusted by the sages of the past. Xiaohao solemnly took the human emperor's seal and swore with a serious expression. Although the position of the human emperor represented supreme power, it also represented unparalleled responsibility. There was a saying that, to wear the crown, one must bear its weight first. As the human emperor, if he didn't do well and caused problems to the human race, the backlash from the fate of the human race would definitely consign him to eternal damnation. Therefore, being the human emperor wasn't without its risks. This was also why the human emperor's ability had to be outstanding. If he wasn't outstanding, there was a real possibility that the fate of the human race would backfire on him. In the Tai Temple, with the change of owner of the human emperor's seal, the supreme power of the human race was officially handed over. This also meant that Xian Yuan had abdicated, and Xiaohao had succeeded. At the same time, this also marked the end of the era of the three emperors. The human race had officially ushered in the era of the 5 emperors. Rumble. The moment Xian Yuan abdicated, in the depths of unknown time and space, in the mysterious river of fate, unprecedented changes occurred. The fate of the human race was completely boiling. The torch flame rose slowly, blooming with brilliant light that was even more dazzling than the sun. It illuminated the entire river of fate, and even the endless time and space of the past, present, and future. Hum 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 hum, human Tao, shrouded in endless light, manifested from nothingness and gradually merged with the torch flame. With the support of human Tao, the torch flame became even more resplendent. An unknown power emanated from its body, filling the entire river of fate in the blink of an eye. Then, the power penetrated through the endless spacetime and spread out towards the desolation world. In an instant, this power covered the entire primordial world. Under the envelopment of this power, the human race also underwent a miraculous change. Wisps of gentle light bloomed from the bodies of the human race, filled with the radiance of humanity. It was so warm and gentle. This was the light of the true nature, and also the light of the spiritual nature. It was the foundation of the human race, the key to the evolution of the innate true spirit. It could also be said that this light was related to whether the human race could go from postnatal to innate. The purer this light was, the more compatible it was with the Taos of the world, and the easier it would be to transform into an innate true spirit. On the contrary, the more impure this light was, the more difficult it was to conform to the great Tao, and the more difficult it would be to cultivate. At the beginning of human life, the mind was pure, neither good nor evil. It could be said that it was chaos. At that time, it was also the moment when the light of the true nature was at its purest. However, as one grew, one's mind would become complicated. Without the support of a strong state of mind, the light of the true nature would inevitably be affected, gradually losing its purity and becoming impure. This was something that could not be avoided. Therefore, in the later stages of cultivation, it was inevitable that cultivators would spend a lot of time polishing the light of the spiritual nature to maintain its purity. It could be said that polishing the light of the spiritual nature had stopped countless prodigies, delaying their rise. But now, everything was different. The power that emanated from Xian Huo illuminated the light of spirituality that was buried deep within the human's body. It appeared clearly in front of everyone and was constantly cleansing this light with the light of humanity to restore it to its original purity. This was the feedback of the human race's luck. The return of the three sovereigns caused the human race's luck to reach an unprecedented peak, completely ascending to the position of the main character of the world, suppressing the entire wilderness. The human race's luck was too strong, and it broke some kind of limit, connecting with the human Tao and the unseen world, causing it to descend and bless them. In this way, the human race naturally benefited. The baptism of the spiritual nature was just the beginning. If it was just a simple baptism of the spiritual nature, although it could be considered a benefit, it was only a one-time benefit, not beneficial to future generations, and the effect was extremely limited. Therefore, as the mighty power of the human Tao spread out, it gradually merged with the human race's luck and was imprinted in the torch flame. This also meant that in the future, the torch flame would have the ability to baptize the spiritual nature. And because of the existence of the human race's clan artifact, the swearin lamp, any human who inherited the spirit of the human race could summon the swearin lamp to carry the torch flame. Being able to receive the torch flame meant that they could use this flame to baptize the spiritual nature and increase their cultivation speed. This was undoubtedly a good thing for the human race, as it could shorten the time to cultivate experts. The most obvious benefit of an increase in luck was that one's luck would become better, cultivation would become easier, and breakthroughs would become easier. There were too many benefits of the heaven and earth's luck. Otherwise, the saints would not have shamelessly fought for it. This was the source of the chaos, and also the number one treasure in the wilderness. And this number one treasure in the wilderness now belonged to the human race. At this point, the human race had become a piece of fat meat in the eyes of the saints and even many great magicians. Everyone wanted to get a hand in it to seek luck. Sigh. The peaceful days of the human race were gone. Feng Zichen would not be lonely anymore. In the future, he, the saints, and even many great magicians would use the human race as a battlefield. They would use all kinds of methods and rack their brains to fight to determine the ultimate fate of the human race. In the future, would the human race continue to be a puppet in the hands of the saints, or would they transcend and become the true overlords of the world? All of this would depend on the battle between Feng Zichen and the saints. Who was the one with the better skills? The change in the destiny of the human race naturally could not be hidden from Xuanyuan's perception. However, this did not prevent him from leaving the wilderness. Because he knew it was his departure, that the destiny of the human race would undergo such a huge change. The future belonged to the young after all. Although the older generation could be immortal and protect the race forever, if there was no rise of the younger generation, it meant that the race had lost its vitality. And a race that did not even have vitality, how could there be a future? It would eventually decay. Therefore, there were experts who rose in every generation, which was the symbol of a race's eternal prosperity. At this time, what the older generation had to do was to release their power in time and make room for the younger generation so that they could have the opportunity to display their ambitions and verify their path. The 5 innate clans did this very well. After every calamity, the rulers of the 5 innate clans would relinquish their power and hand it all over to the young people. They would go to the 4 extremes to pursue the supreme path. This point was worth learning from the human race. Everyone, take another look at the great mountains and rivers of the wilderness. It's time for us to leave. After taking one last look at the wilderness, Xianyuan Yulong rose to the sky. And with him were the experts from the myriad clans. At this point, the glory of the myriad clans had completely come to an end. The wilderness also ushered in the era of the human race. Sweeping away the myriad clans, repeating civilization, and establishing the supreme foundation of the human race was the achievement of the 3 emperors and their figures. Now, the human race was suppressing the wilderness. None of the myriad clans dared to compete with them. They all had to obey their orders. This was the symbol of the 3 emperors' merit. The 3 emperors had succeeded. They brought with them the era that belonged to them. They ascended to the sky. And the human race, and even the wilderness, would usher in the era of the 5 emperors. The foreign enemies had been wiped out by the 3 emperors, and the wilderness no longer had a match for the human race. And the mission of the 5 emperors was to govern the human race and rebuild its glory. With the foundation left behind by the 3 emperors, what the 5 emperors had to do was to work hard to develop the human race and constantly increase its foundation so that it would continue to grow stronger. In this vast wilderness, it would create a glory that belonged to the human race. The witches and demons had never been the goal of the human race. Surpassing them was the goal of the human race. Although the witches and demons were strong, they were not the protagonists of heaven and earth. But the human race was. Therefore, if they could not surpass the witches and demons, then the human race would not be worthy of the title of the protagonist of heaven and earth. Chapter 638. What was the protagonist of heaven and earth? The strongest race in the primordial world. Since the human race had inherited this position, their strength would definitely become the number 1 in the primordial world. And this number 1 did not refer to the number 1 in the current world, but the number 1 in the past, present, and future, and countless space-time. To surpass all the forces in the primordial world. In the current world, although the human race was the number 1 race in the primordial world, in the upper stream of the long river of time, the mark of the shaman and demon race still existed. That powerful aura was imprinted in the deepest part of space-time, eternal and indestructible. It was like 2 immortal monuments, suppressing the past, making it difficult for countless later races to reach. The shaman and demon race were the 2 mountains in front of the human race. Their strength was deeply ingrained in the bones of the great divine beings. If the human race could not surpass them, then in the eyes of the great divine beings, the human race would be puppets supported by the heavenly Tao. They could not be considered the true protagonists of heaven and earth and would be at their mercy. They would be far from being able to receive the same treatment as the shaman and demon race. Picking the tallest out of the shortest was referring to the human race. Therefore, only by surpassing the shaman and demon race could the human race get rid of the current awkward situation and make the great divine beings fearful and not dare to casually take advantage of the human race. However, how difficult was it to surpass the shaman and demon race? Since the birth of the primordial world, there had been countless experts in the past, but there had never been anyone who was on par with the shaman and demon race. They represented the peak of the primordial world. They were too strong, almost occupying all the good fortune of heaven and earth. The right time, place, and people. These 3 were all occupied by the shaman and demon race. It was almost impossible for the race in the future to achieve what they had achieved. First of all, the environment of heaven and earth had changed greatly, from the connate era to the postnatal era. It was difficult to see the connate essence again, and the difficulty of producing experts had undoubtedly increased countless times. Just this point cut off the possibility of surpassing the shaman and demon race. But in the difficult situation, the human race had to do it too. There was a saying that man could conquer the heavens. Turning the impossible into the possible could show the ability of the human race. In the distant heavenly court, as Xianyuan ascended to the heavens, there were also huge changes. Under the witness of a group of great divine beings, the Yen Emperor Shenong passed the position of the heavenly emperor to the human emperor Xianyuan, known as the Central Yellow Emperor. The abdication of the Yen Emperor and the succession of the Yellow Emperor opened a new chapter in the primordial world. Affected by this, Feng Zichen, who was recuperating on the Emperor's star, received the help of the world momentum and recovered from all his injuries in one fell swoop. His old injuries were all gone. Feng Zichen felt his whole body relax. His state of mind had reached perfection at this moment. Even the road ahead that he had been stuck in previously had gradually become clear. He was one step closer to becoming primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. 3 million years. 3 million years later, I will become the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. Feng Zichen secretly clenched his fist and said to himself excitedly. He was a step closer to attaining the Tao, so even with his mental state, great waves had arisen in his heart, and it was impossible for him to maintain his calm any longer. The Yellow Emperor reigned for 1,000,000 years. The White Emperor reigned for 1,000,000 years. The Black Emperor reigned for 1,000,000 years. The three emperors had reigned for a total of 3 million years. After that, it was the day when the five elements celestial emperor reached perfection. It was also the day when Feng Zichen's merit was completed and he took another step forward. What was expected to attain the Tao? That was it. To mortals, 3 million years was an unimaginably long period of time. But for powerful beings, it was not too long. It was just the time of a seclusion. The day of attaining the Tao was really close. Unlike when Xianyuan succeeded the throne, the situation of the myriad races was different. When Xiaohao succeeded the throne, the myriad races were all respectful and did not dare to act rashly. After the tireless efforts of the 3 generations of human emperors, the strength of the myriad races had been weakened to the extreme. Their essence, energy, and spirit were not as good as before, and they were far from having the capital to contend with the human race. With such a huge gap, how could the myriad races look down on the new patriarch of the human race? Did they feel that their lives were too comfortable and wanted to find excitement for themselves? Compared to the 3 emperors, the situation that the 5 emperors had to face was really much happier. The hidden dangers in the primordial world were almost completely cleaned up by the 3 emperors. Next, as long as the 5 emperors continued to develop step by step, the strength of the human race would become stronger and stronger. This was the benefit of being a junior. With the 3 emperors in front, they did not have the shade of their ancestors to rely on. Therefore, they could only fight for the world with their bare hands. They were pioneers. It was as if they had created the world in the chaos. They used their fists and feet to open up a paradise for the human race in the dangerous primordial world. And it was precisely because of their efforts that the situation was completely opened up for the 5 emperors who came later. It could be said that the 3 emperors were the rich generation. They started from scratch and built a huge foundation. As for the 5 emperors, they were the rich second generation. Because of the efforts of their ancestors, they saved the time to accumulate primitive capital. One step at a time. With the capital of their ancestors, the 5 emperors could easily open up the situation. The difficulties they had to face were naturally much easier than those of the 3 emperors. At the very least, during the period of the 3 emperors, the human race did not have as many experts as they did now. In the early period of Xiaohao's reign, he established a strange system. He used all kinds of birds as civil and military officials. The specific division of labor was carried out according to the characteristics of different birds. The phoenix was in charge of the birds, then the swallow was in charge of spring, the shrike was in charge of summer, the parrot was in charge of autumn, and the golden pheasant was in charge of winter. In addition, he sent 5 kinds of birds to manage daily affairs. The filial partridge was in charge of education. The ferocious pheasant was in charge of military affairs. The fair cuckoo was in charge of construction. The majestic eagle was in charge of law. The eloquent turtledove was in charge of speech. There were also 9 kinds of birds in charge of agriculture, so that the people would not be licentious. The 5 kinds of pheasants were in charge of carpentry, painting, pottery, dyeing, and leatherworking. This was the original system of the human race, and it was also the source of the various official positions of the human race in the future. It was precisely by relying on these systems that the human race developed in an orderly manner under Xiaohao's governance. Their strength was increasing rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. The prosperity of the human race began from this. Of course, while developing the human race, Xiaohao did not forget the myriad races. Unlike his father, Xianyuan, Xiaohao did not blindly suppress the myriad races. Instead, he tried his best to promote them to integrate into the human race so that they could create a prosperous era in the primordial world together. According to the different characteristics of the myriad races, Xiaohao arranged them in suitable positions one by one. He used their unique abilities to contribute to the great cause of the human race and the prosperity of the primordial world. For example, the wood spirit clan, who was naturally close to spiritual herbs, Xiaohao arranged for them to cultivate spiritual herbs for the human race's daily needs. The earth spirit clan, who was naturally close to the earth, Xiaohao asked them to sort out the earth veins and create large amounts of spirit fields for the human race. There were also the fire spirit clan, who was good at controlling fire. Xiaohao asked them to refine weapons or refine pills for the human race's warriors. Such situations. There were simply too many to count. In short, every race. Xiaohao could find a suitable position for them. He would not let them be idle and let them shine for the great cause of the human race. Of course, Xiaohao did not oppress the myriad races blindly. He only took a portion of the benefits obtained by the myriad races, not all of them. If he really did so, no matter how strong the human race was, the myriad races would rebel. This was the leak. He could not cut it too harshly. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if his roots were hurt. Even the leak was like this. Not to mention the myriad races. For the myriad races, Xiaohao still had to be comforted from time to time. After all, back then, Xianyuan suppressed the myriad races too ruthlessly and almost broke their roots. Now, with the rise of the human race and the decline of the myriad races, the set back then was a little outdated and did not match the current situation. Therefore, after Xiaohao succeeded to the throne, the human race's attitude towards the myriad races changed drastically, giving them the respect they deserved so that they could do their best to contribute to the great cause of the human race. Let the descendants of the myriad races work harder for the rise of the human race. Tearful. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 700,000 years had passed. At this moment, it was already the late period of Xiaohao's rule. Compared to back then, the human race had already undergone a huge change. The myriad races were united and developed the human race together, causing the human race to change all the time. Their foundation was constantly increasing, and more experts were born. The younger generation of geniuses was endless. It was a great demeanor of a great race in the primordial world. But there were no changes. There were limits. The strength of the human race. It was impossible for it to continue expanding without limit. This was unrealistic and unreasonable. Therefore, after the initial period of rapid expansion, the development of the human race gradually slowed down. In fact, at this time, they had already reached a bottleneck. The momentum of expansion had completely stopped. This was something that every race had to experience in the process of development. In fact, the human race should have encountered such a situation many years ago. But unfortunately, Xiaohao's methods were too brilliant. He actually thought of a way to use the myriad races to support the human race. He forcefully raised the upper limit of the human race's development, allowing the human race's strength to continue to expand rapidly. Until now. When the potential of the myriad races was exhausted, the human race's bottleneck period reappeared. The so-called bottleneck was not that the human race's strength was no longer increasing, but that it had reached a state of saturation and could not expand rapidly like before. In such a situation, unless there was a major change. Otherwise, the human race's future development could only rely on the passage of time, accumulating bit by bit. And in such a situation, Xiaohao had already expected this. He also had a solution. He began to inventory the human race's treasure vault. With the departure of the experts of the myriad races, it was time to set up the 365 Heavenly Palace. He believed, once the Heavenly Palace was really set up and connected to the boundless starry sky, the primordial world would definitely undergo a huge change. And this change would definitely be able to help the human race break through the bottleneck and enter the period of rapid expansion again. Setting up 365 Heavenly Palace in the primordial world was a plan that had been made during the Shennong era. Unfortunately, although this plan was good, it could not be carried out because the timing was not right. It could only be delayed. And this wait was 2 million years. This great plan that was formulated during the Shennong era, after the Xianyuan era, finally waited for the time to be carried out during the Xiaohao era, and it could see the light of day again. Yes. This plan had been continuously perfected by 2 generations of human emperors, a great emperor, and 3 supreme experts of the primordial world. It could be said to be perfect. Once it was really carried out, it would definitely bring unprecedented changes to the human race and even the entire primordial world. Xiaohao firmly believed so. Of course, in fact, that was also the case. Because this plan was not perfected by Shenong and Xianyuan, but by Feng Zichen and Fuxi. Why did Fuxi need humans? The founder of the Khanate 8 trigrams, a master of the primordial world's deduction, and a great master of the Tao of array formations. And this was only the Fuxi of the past. The current Fuxi was even more powerful than back then. First, in terms of cultivation, he had now become a secondary saint, and his strength was comparable to a saint, much stronger than back then. Then, in terms of numinous treasures, back then, Fuxi did not have the conditions to possess the He Tu and the Book of Luo. But now, the He Tu and the Book of Luo had long been completely refined by him. With the top-notch deduction power, coupled with the top-notch deduction treasure, and the double buff, one could imagine how much Fuxi's ability had improved. As for Feng Zichen, that was even more incredible. In terms of attainments in deduction, Feng Zichen might not be as good as Fuxi, but he had a cheat. Whether it was the Hongmeng Daozhong or the fragment of the creation jade disc, they were both top-notch treasures of the primordial world. With the combined strength of the two, Feng Zichen dared to say that in the primordial world, only Tao ancestor Hong Jun could surpass him in the Tao of deduction. Not even the demon ancestor Rahu could do it. Because he did not have the creation jade disc. Think about it. Back then, Fuxi and Di Jun joined forces. They could deduce a top-notch formation like the heavenly cycle star formation of the primordial world. Now, the two more powerful people joined forces and deduced a perfect plan together. How could it not be powerful and perfect? If this matter was successful, it would be a great deed of merit. However, Xiaohao's idea was very good, but it was obvious that he had thought too simply of this plan. When he finished checking the treasury of the human race, he was really dumbfounded. Not enough. Not enough at all. With the current foundation of the human race, not to mention refining 365 heavenly cycle divine palaces, they could not even refine half of them. According to Xiaohao's estimation, even if the human race used everything they had, they could only refine more than 100 heavenly cycle divine palaces. But this was far from enough. It was only then that Xiaohao realized that he had overestimated the human race. In the end, the world was different. The scene of treasures everywhere in the ancient times could no longer be seen. Therefore, even if the human race occupied more than half of the resources in the primordial world, the benefits they obtained were just a drop in the bucket for refining the heavenly cycle divine palaces. Compared to the ancient times, the quality of the resources now was undoubtedly worse. One was innate, one was postnatal, the difference of one word was the difference between heaven and earth. In the ancient times, a casual breath of a cultivator was better than dozens of days of bitter cultivation now. This was the difference. In such an environment, even if the human race dominated the entire primordial world, they would not be able to collect anything good. Chapter 639. Seeing that the plan that the 3 generations of experts had planned for nearly 3 million years was about to be realized in his hands, Xiaohao's excitement could be imagined. But who knew that at this critical moment, this great plan would be announced to be aborted because of the lack of reserves of the human race? Xiaohao's heart crumbled at this. In this short period of time, he had experienced the ups and downs of life. This huge difference really made him feel helpless. However, even though he was helpless, he still had to think of a way. He could not put this great plan on hold forever, right? It was obviously unrealistic to continue passing it down for future generations. After all, the environment in the world would only get worse, not better. Therefore, if he could not collect the materials to refine the heavenly palace now, he would not be able to collect them in the future. Therefore, this plan had to be completed in his hands and could not be left to future generations. If he continued to delay, this plan would gradually be lost in the long river of time. Refine. He had to refine. Even if he had to think of all ways, he had to refine the 365 heavenly palace. Silently, Xiaohao made up his mind. Just treat it as. This was his test to achieve the Tao. When Fuxi was on the throne, there was chaos among the Khanate beasts. When Shenong was on the throne, there was the tribulation of Khanate tribulation energy. When Xianyuan was on the throne, there was the disaster of war among the 10,000 races. And since he, Xiaohao, succeeded to the throne, the 4 seas had been peaceful. In the entire primordial world, there were no disasters. If nothing unexpected happened, he would smoothly pass his term and become one of the 5 emperors. However, although the achievements of the 5 emperors could not be compared to the 3 emperors, they were still one of the top achievements of the primordial world. How could it be so easy to obtain? Therefore, the matter of the heavenly palace was a test for Xiaohao by the heavenly Tao. If he succeeded, he would be one of the 5 emperors of the primordial world. If he failed, he could only be one of the 5 emperors of the human race. The treasure of heaven and earth, the top karmic position in the world, how could he allow it so easily? It was impossible to think about it. He had to achieve a great achievement that would not be easy for 10,000 generations. In the imperial ancestral temple, Xiaohao sat in meditation for 3,000 years. He finally thought of a way that was not a way. That was using the hands of the 10,000 races to refine the heavenly palace. As an innate race that had been passed down for countless years, they had declined under the deliberate suppression of the human race. However, it was undeniable that their foundation was definitely much deeper than that of the human race. Even if they were never rich before, they were born early. As early as the ancient times, or even the ancient times, they had already existed. In that era, even a blade of grass that could be seen everywhere on the ground would be considered an incredible treasure in this day and age. In other words, the myriad races in the primordial era and the primordial era could casually accumulate a very precious amount of wealth. They were born early. This was the greatest capital of the myriad races. Therefore, they would definitely be able to gather the materials needed to refine the heavenly palace, and they would be acquired cardinal treasures. Of course, a single innate race might not have the ability to do so, but the combined power of all races would definitely be able to do so. According to the method that Xiaohao came up with, they would first use the power of the human race to refine the heavenly palace. They would refine as much as they could, and the rest would be left to the myriad races to refine. This method would first release the benefits of having the heavenly palace so that the myriad races would know about it. It would attract their curiosity and force them to take the initiative to ask the human race about the heavenly palace. Then, the human race would cover it up and not admit to it at all. On the other hand, they would continue to release news about the heavenly palace to let the myriad races confirm the authenticity of the matter. In the end, things would be much simpler. After confirming the authenticity of the heavenly palace, the myriad races would definitely be tempted and would think of all ways to obtain a heavenly palace. The heavenly palace had the ability to go against the innate. The cultivation environment was comparable to the famous mountains and rivers of ancient times. It could support Daluo Jinxian's cultivation. Such a powerful ability was the hope of a race's rise. Therefore, as long as the myriad races were smart, they would see the benefits of having the heavenly palace. And the human race, who had the heavenly palace, could use it to control the myriad races and make them contribute materials for the human race to refine the heavenly palace. Of course, if the myriad races wanted to willingly give up enough materials to refine the heavenly palace, the human race would have to pay a price. Therefore, Xiaohao decided to give up a portion of the quota to refine the heavenly palace to the myriad races. After learning about the universal shrine, the myriad races would definitely be eager to learn more about it. Hence, they would constantly ask the human race. Seeing the myriad races like this, the human race naturally knew that the matter of the heavenly palace had been completely exposed and could no longer hide it from the myriad races. At this time, Xiaohao had to appear at the right time. In consideration of the myriad race's hard work and great contributions, the human race decided to give up a portion of the quota to refine the heavenly palace to the myriad races. However, there were too many myriad races, and the quota was limited. They could not easily give it away. Therefore, the human race had to think carefully about which race was more suitable to give these quotas to. With that said, the myriad races returned to wait for news. When the human race made a decision, they would inform them. This was equivalent to hinting for the myriad races to give benefits to the human race. After all, why would the human race give them the quota for no reason? Such an undisguised plan was equivalent to a blatant extortion. There were countless capable people in the myriad races, so they naturally could see through it. But so what if they could see through it? For the future of their race, even if they were unwilling, they had no choice but to grit their teeth and offer gifts to the human race in order to obtain the quota to refine the heavenly palace. This was an overt scheme. Even though they knew it was a scheme, they could not avoid it. As for Xiaohao, with this scheme, he could sit in the human race and wait for the myriad races to offer treasures for him to refine the heavenly palace. After Xiaohao used up all the gifts from the myriad races, the number of heavenly palace that had not been refined would be the quota that the human race would give to the myriad races. As for how to distribute it, that was simple. He could directly list the gifts from the myriad races, from the highest to the lowest. Whoever gave the most would receive the quota. Of course, in order to ensure that the strength of the myriad races would increase, there would naturally be restrictions on the allocation of the heavenly palace quotas. That was, each race could only have one heavenly palace at most. This was the limit. Xiaohao was a man of action. After he had a plan in mind, he directly ordered everyone to take action. Soon, the news about the heavenly palace spread throughout the entire primordial world. Naturally, the myriad races also received this news. At first, they were still a little skeptical about this news. However, when someone secretly went to the human race out of curiosity and saw the 365 huge palaces standing in the human territory, they no longer had any doubts. The truth was right in front of them. There was nothing to argue about. This was the greatest persuasion. After the news was confirmed, the entire myriad races were in an uproar. They all went to the human race to ask about the heavenly palace. In the beginning, the human race naturally tried to dodge this matter. However, as more and more evidence was taken out by the patriarchs of the myriad races, the human race had no choice but to admit the truth of this matter. After all, the 365 heavenly sacred palaces were clearly visible in the human race's territory. Hence, the human race would not be able to hide this fact. Of course, the human race did not want to hide it. What happened after that was much simpler. Everything was going according to Xiaohao's plan. Time flowed like water. Unknowingly, hundreds of thousands of years had passed. Hundreds of thousands of years were enough for the matter of distributing the slots to refine the heavenly palace to the myriad races to come to an end. Although the final outcome of this matter, there were slight differences from what Xiaohao had expected. However, in general, it did not affect the overall situation. Instead, it was even more perfect. According to the outcome that Xiaohao had expected, the slots to refine the heavenly palace should have fallen into the hands of a few Khanate clans. After all, they were the strongest and had the deepest foundation. Naturally, they were extremely generous when they made a move. It was normal for the quota of refining the heavenly cycle temple to fall into their hands. However, the outcome was often the most unexpected. Among the myriad races, some of the Khanate clans whose strength was in the upper middle class were deeply aware that their strength was far from being comparable to those Khanate clans. Therefore, it was almost impossible for them to obtain the slots to refine the heavenly palace this time. They would definitely not be able to compete with those Khanate clans. However, if they were asked to give up just like that, they would not be willing. That was the hope of rising up. In this primordial world where the cultivation environment was getting worse and worse, it was not easy to see the hope of rising up. No matter who it was, they would not give up so easily. They had not tried, so how could they know that they would not succeed? As the saying goes, when one is poor, one will change. In their desperation, those Khanate clans whose strength was in the upper middle class really thought of a way to defeat the Khanate clans. That was to join forces. The strength of a single clan might not be able to compete with the Khanate clans, but the strength of several clans definitely far surpassed the Khanate clans. Based on this idea, the clans that had a better relationship with each other formed small interest groups one after another and joined forces to offer gifts to the human race. As members of the Khanate myriad races, even if there was a difference in strength, the difference would not be too great. After all, the Khanate clans that were too weak had long been destroyed in the catastrophe of heaven and earth. Therefore, when several clans joined forces, they would definitely surpass a single Khanate clan. The Khanate clans had failed. With the alliance of these Khanate clans that were in the upper middle class, most of the confident Khanate clans had failed. The gifts that they gave were not as valuable as those of these clans. As for Xiaohao, from the moment he thought of this method, he had already made up his mind to value everything. In other words, he would choose whoever gave him the most benefits. As for whether this gift was given by one party or by many parties, he did not care at all. It could even be said that Xiaohao was happy to see this happen. The significance of a single race possessing a cycle divine palace was completely different from that of multiple races possessing a cycle divine palace. The former could allow that clan to rise again. As for the latter, although it could also allow those Khanate clans to rise again, it would undoubtedly take a much longer time. The same resources were enjoyed by one person alone and shared with several people. The results were completely different. After this unexpected scene happened, Xiaohao wished that he could give all the slots to refine the heavenly temple to those beneficial communities so that they could share the results. But unfortunately, Xiaohao could not. As for why, it could only be said that those Khanate clans had given too much, so Xiaohao had no reason to refuse. After more than 100,000 years, Xiaohao used the strength of the human race and the resources offered by the myriad races to refine a total of 240 heavenly temples. The number of heavenly temples totaled 365. A set of universal sacred palaces consisted of 365 palaces. The human clan had refined 240 of them, leaving 115 universal sacred palaces unrefined. And these 115 heavenly temples were the slots that the human race had allocated to the myriad races. With the completion of the heavenly temples, Xiaohao also came out of seclusion and announced the list of slots to the myriad races. When this name was announced, the myriad races were in an uproar. Especially those Khanate clans that had failed. They were extremely vexed. Before the incident, who would have thought that there was such a method of joining forces? Of course, even though they were vexed, they still did not dare to let those Khanate clans cause trouble. Not to mention that the human race would not allow it, even if those Khanate clans joined forces, they would not be able to deal with them. Therefore, it was fine if they did not cause trouble. Once they did, they would definitely be the ones to suffer. But no matter what, losing the heavenly temples was undoubtedly a huge loss for these Khanate clans. Others had them, but they did not. If there were no accidents, as time passed, they would eventually be surpassed by others. They were used to being high and mighty, so how could they tolerate others looking down on them? The failure this time finally became the last straw that broke the camel's back. It caused the emotions that those Khanate clans had accumulated for countless years to completely erupt. They had had enough. They had had enough of the oppression of the human race. Therefore, they decided to leave. They wanted to follow in the footsteps of their ancestors and head to the heaven realm. If they continued to stay in the primordial world, they would never have the chance to surpass the human race. They could only live under the oppression of the human race. Since that was the case, they might as well go to the heaven realm and try their luck. That place still maintained the innate environment. Compared to the primordial world, it was undoubtedly more suitable for them, the innate clans. Of course, it was also more dangerous. But if they went there, with their innate clans' identities, they might be able to make a name for themselves. Wasn't that better than continuing to stay in the primordial world? Cultivators, it was in the word, fight. Fight for fate with the heavens, fight for luck with the earth, fight for wealth with others. In the past, they did not fight, so today, they were bullied by the human race. Now, if they did not fight, they would completely decline. Therefore, they wanted to go to the heaven realm to fight and see if they could surpass the human race. Just as some of the Khanate clans were preparing to evacuate the primordial world, Xiaohao was not idle. He began his great cause of establishing the heavenly temples. Chapter 640. For this, Xiaohao also gave the power of the human race. He handed it all to his nephew, Zhuanxu. Zhuanxu was the grandson of the emperor. He was the grandson of human Emperor Xianyuan and the nephew of Emperor Xiaohao. At the same time, he was also the reincarnation of the Water Dragon Lord, the patriarch of the Water Dragon clan in the ancient times. After the ancient war, the Water Dragon Lord fell to protect the human race and fell into silence. However, the human race had always repaid kindness. How could they watch the Water Dragon Lord fall and do nothing? Therefore, after Feng Zichen verified the power of the blood altar, he immediately used this treasure to revive the innate true spirits of the three ancestors of the human race, the Water Dragon Lord, and the other experts of the 5 innate clans. He also used the Emperor Purple Chi to nourish their true spirits so as to give them a shocking opportunity. That was the beginning of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. Countless years had passed since Feng Zichen implemented his plan. Now, the 3 sovereigns had completed their work. The leader of the 5 emperors, Emperor Xiaohao, had also reached the end of his reign. The Water Dragon Lord's innate true spirit had also reincarnated at the right time and joined the human race to ensure the continuation of the 5 emperors' legacy. As the reincarnation of Daluo Jingxian, Zhuanxu was the same as his predecessors. He was born with incomparable talent and could be said to be the #1 person of the younger generation. It was his outstanding performance that attracted Xiaohao's attention. After a series of tests, Xiaohao was extremely satisfied with Zhuanxu and groomed him as his successor. As Xiaohao gradually focused his energy on building the Heavenly Cycle Palace, he inevitably had no time to care about the matters of the human race. Therefore, at this time, as his successor, Zhuanxu could step forward and take charge of the human race for him. Firstly, this would allow Xiaohao to focus on the Heavenly Palace and not worry about the human race. Secondly, he could use this to train Zhuanxu and increase his administrative experience. Thirdly, he could use this to establish Zhuanxu's dignity so that he could better complete the transfer of power of the human race in the future. Xiaohao was naturally relieved to leave the human race's affairs to Zhuanxu. Therefore, he could deal with the Heavenly Palace without worry. In fact, it was not difficult to build the Heavenly Palace. The difficult part was how to coordinate the relationship between the 10,000 races. The matter of establishing the Cycle Divine Palace involved many things, far surpassing Xiao Chen's imagination. Once it was done, it would definitely benefit the entire primordial world. With such great benefits right in front of their eyes, how could they not be tempted? Therefore, everyone from the myriad races wanted to get involved. Even if he could not obtain the Cycle Divine Palace, he had to think of a way to get a share of this and earn some merit. Otherwise, it would be hard for them to not feel indignant when they saw others benefit while they had nothing. Thus, they would deliberately cause trouble. If the myriad races were united, such a situation would naturally not occur. But clearly, the myriad races were not. On the contrary, there were many races that held grudges against each other. If there were too many people, there would be conflicts. This was the case for the human race. It was the same in the myriad races. For example, wolves eating sheep. Could it be, did the wolf clan have a natural enmity with the sheep clan? Of course not. At that time, when the 10,000 races were born, they were all ignorant and did not know how to fight. They lived in harmony in the untainted land. However, the human heart was fickle. As time passed, the Tao hearts of the 10,000 races were stained with dust, and greed was born. At this point, whether it was for benefits, for the Tao, or for quarrels, in short, the 10,000 races gradually started to fight. Some hatred would slowly dissipate with the passage of time. However, some hatred would become more and more unforgettable as time passed. Therefore, this turned into a feud. What was a feud? A feud of generations. Only when one side was completely exterminated would this feud be eliminated. However, if the two sides were unable to completely exterminate the other side, then after a long period of silence, this hatred would appear in another way. For example, natural enemies. Wolves and sheep were like that. The reason was the hatred from countless years ago that had been passed down to today's results. The 10,000 races played tricks on each other, greatly delaying the process of establishing the Cycle Divine Palace. Xiaohao had really put in a lot of effort to coordinate the relationship between the 10,000 races. Of course, although Xiaohao was vexed by these things, he was still happy to see them like this. After all, the 10,000 races that were full of contradictions were more reassuring than the 10,000 races that were united. While the 10,000 races were playing tricks on each other, Xiaohao was not idle either. He was doing something. He secretly set up some restrictions on the Cycle Divine Palace that was about to be given to the 10,000 races. These restrictions were not to restrict the ability of the Cycle Divine Palace to make its ability to transform spiritual energy inferior to that of the human race. The purpose of doing so was too obvious. It was simply an insult to the intelligence of the 10,000 races. At the same time, it also made the human race seem a little petty. Therefore, Xiaohao disdained to do so. The purpose of setting up these restrictions was to prevent the 10,000 races from using the Cycle Divine Palace to threaten the human race after they gained control of it. 365 Cycle Divine Palaces stood on the untainted land, secretly complementing Zhoxing. They formed the galaxy cosmic light array, evolved the Panga god, and protected the earth veins. At the same time, this was also a method to deal with enemies. Once the array was activated, the combination of the power of Zhoxing and the power of the earth veins could easily suppress any existence below primordial chaos. Even if the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian came, it could trap him for more than 1,000 years, if not completely suppress him. This was a form of protection for the untainted land. At the same time, it was also one of the trump cards of the human race. But all of this was on the premise that all the Cycle Divine Palaces were still under the control of the human race. But now, because the human race's foundation was limited, they could not refine all the Cycle Divine Palaces. Emperor Xiaohao had no choice but to divide a portion of the Cycle Divine Palaces and hand them over to the 10,000 races to refine. In this way, although the Cycle Divine Palaces were still a method to protect the untainted land, they could not be considered the trump card of the human race. Think about it. If the human race activated the Cycle Divine Palaces and fought a bloody battle with the enemy, and the 10,000 races that controlled the Cycle Divine Palaces suddenly turned on them at the critical moment and stabbed the human race in the back, then the human race would be in big trouble. In fact, they did not even need to deal with the human race. They only needed to suppress the power of the Cycle Divine Palaces at the critical moment and prevent them from erupting. Just this point was enough for the human race to suffer. This kind of attack from the inside was the most fatal. Therefore, they had to be on guard against this. That was the reason why Xiaohao had secretly set up restrictions in the Cycle's sacred palace. This restriction would not hinder the normal operation of the Cycle Divine Palaces, nor would it affect the 10,000 races that lived in it. Its only function was to prevent the 10,000 races from mobilizing the power of the Cycle Divine Palaces at the critical moment. That was enough. If they could not mobilize the Cycle Divine Palaces, the 10,000 races would not be able to stab the human race in the back at the critical moment. Xiaohao's goal would be achieved. In this way, even if the 10,000 races found out, they would not say anything. Because if it were them, they would do the same. For the safety of their race, what was the big deal about using some underhanded methods? This was human nature. Of course, the biggest reason for this was that the human race was strong enough that the 10,000 races could not compete with them. Otherwise, the 10,000 races would definitely cause trouble. After all, understanding was one thing. However, if the things that they had bought with real money were secretly used by others, causing them to be unable to use them at the critical moment, no one would feel comfortable. It was still the same sentence. As long as one was strong enough, one could ignore the rules and make others not dare to say anything even if they were angry. Among the 10,000 races, although they had been trying to trip each other. However, they also knew that the matter of establishing the heavenly cycle of stars was too important. If this matter could not be carried out because of them, then their fate would definitely not be good. Therefore, although everyone was trying to trip each other up, they still had a limit. They would not make too much of a fuss and affect the progress of establishing the Cycle Divine Palaces. Just like that, with the efforts of the 10,000 races, the Cycle Divine Palaces were like bamboo shoots after the rain, standing one after another on the primordial land. Everything was going according to Xiaohao's plan. And all of this was seen by Feng Zichen on the Emperor Star. On the primordial land. After such a big thing had happened, how could it hide from Feng Zichen's eyes? In fact, from the moment Xiaohao began to plan to build Zhouxing, Feng Zichen had secretly cast his gaze and kept an eye on the movements of the human race. He even knew that the human race did not have enough treasures to refine the cycle divine palaces. But he was not like before. To fill the gap for the human race. Previously, Feng Zichen had already made an exception to support the human race. This time, it was better to let the human race solve it themselves. The heavens move vigorously, and a gentleman must constantly strive for self-improvement. The prosperity of a race did not rely on the efforts of a single person, but the efforts of everyone. If he was to do everything, like a nanny, wouldn't the human race repeat the mistakes of the ancient times? He could do everything alone. What was the use of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors? Therefore, from the beginning to the end, Feng Zichen only watched and did not help Xiaohao in the slightest. Xiaohao did not disappoint him. Under such circumstances, Xiaohao did not even think of asking him for help. Instead, he planned to think of a way himself. Worth this was enough for Feng Zichen to feel gratified. Because if Xiaohao really asked him for help, Feng Zichen really did not know if he could really make up his mind to refuse. No matter how many harsh words he said. No matter how determined he was, but in the end, he was still a human. As a human, how could Feng Zichen remain indifferent in the face of the human race's request for help? Only a person with affection and loyalty could be considered a human. If one cultivated to the end, without the 7 emotions and 6 desires, one would have a heart of stone. One would be like a cold stone. The only thing in one's heart would be the supreme great Tao. One would be extremely indifferent to all things in the world. Then, one would not be considered a human. It was the Tao. Only the Tao. Could one let go of everything and not worry about anything? But it was obvious that Feng Zichen had too many things in his heart that he could not let go of. Therefore, he was still a human. He could not achieve the Tao, and he could not forget the human race. Therefore, if Xiaohao really asked him for help, he would be very disappointed, but there was a high chance that he would not refuse. The human heart was like this. How many people had escaped since ancient times? Fortunately, Xiaohao did not choose to ask Feng Zichen for help. Instead, he was prepared to think of a way himself. Facing difficulties was worthy of praise. Xiaohao was worthy of being the human emperor. He quickly came up with a solution. He used the hands of the myriad races to refine the heavenly palace. Regarding this method, Feng Zichen was very satisfied. In the short term, dividing the heavenly palace to the myriad races would undoubtedly cause the human race to lose a major trump card and plant hidden dangers in the future. If the myriad races rose because of this, wouldn't the human race be trapped in a cocoon of their own making? But from another point of view, with the rise of the myriad races, it would undoubtedly bring great external pressure to the human race to urge the human race to continue to improve. Invincibility was not a good thing. Without an opponent for a long time, it would undoubtedly cause the human race to slack off, and this would be the beginning of their defeat. Moreover, with the disappearance of external pressure, the internal pressure would expand, leading to the occurrence of internal strife. Therefore, it was a good thing to give the human race some external pressure. On the path of cultivation, if one did not advance, they would retreat. It was the same no matter where it was placed. Of course, Feng Zichen didn't just stand by and watch. While he was observing, he was also on guard to prevent anyone from secretly attacking and destroying this matter. Not everyone hoped that the primordial world would become better and better. Chaos Fiend God and some fallen great divinities were the greatest threat. A confrontation between such existences could not be resisted by the current strength of the human race. Therefore, this required Feng Zichen to protect them. Perhaps Feng Zichen's warning had an effect. Or perhaps, after the failure last time, the chaos fiend god had chosen to temporarily hide. In short, the construction of the heavenly palace was completed smoothly. During this period, no one attacked to destroy it. In the 95th year of Shaohao's calendar, after hundreds of thousands of years of hard work, Shaohao combined the power of the human race and the myriad races to finally establish 360 Zhouxing in the primordial world. At this moment, in the ancestral land of the human race, a majestic palace floated in the void, emitting a resplendent divine light. That was the center of the human race's power, the supreme palace, the human emperor's palace. At the same time, it was also the center of the 360 heavenly palace, the Ziwei palace. Whether it was the human race's heavenly palace or the primordial world's heavenly palace, there was only one Ziwei palace that represented the head of all the divine palaces. That was the human race's supreme palace, the human emperor's palace. It was the center of the human race's power and the myriad race's power. With the power of one palace, it operated 2 galaxy cosmic light arrays alone. Perhaps the current human emperor's palace was not the strongest grotto heaven in the primordial world. However, as the 2 galaxy cosmic light arrays operated, its origin would become stronger and stronger. One day, it would become the #1 cultivation holy land in the primordial world. In front of the human emperor's palace, Shaohao ordered people to set up an altar and led the experts of the myriad races to pray to the heavens. Heavenly Tao above. Today, Shaohao of the human race has led the people of the myriad races and spent 200,000 years to establish 365 heavenly palace in the primordial world to protect the earth. We are here to announce to the heavens that we hope the heavens will judge us. Heavenly palace, establish. As soon as he finished speaking, the heavens immediately sensed it. Instantly, an extremely majestic will. It appeared from the void.